Okay.
Ron.
Okay, all right. We're still chatting up here, so sorry, folks, but I think we are ready to begin, and I want to welcome everyone this evening. I will call the meeting to order, and would you like to join us in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, Mary, roll call, please.
Olson.
Here.
Sykes.
Here.
Johnson. Here. Kellum.
Here.
Kopczynski.
Here.
Coburn.
Here.
Okay, before we have our scheduled business this evening of our public hearing, folks, we have a couple special presentations first. So we have quite a few people here in the audience for our special presentation. And first is Historic Preservation Month Awards. So, Shauna?
Thank you, Mayor and Councilors. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Very good. Again, I'm Shauna Adams. I am a planner with the Community Development Department, and I staff the city's historic program and Landmarks Advisory Commission. I'm here because May is National Historic Preservation Month, and each May in celebration of National Historic Preservation Month, the Landmarks Advisory Commission selects individuals in the community to recognize for helping to preserve and to promote Albany's historic landmarks and heritage. So tonight, the mayor will be handing out 3 awards, and along with the awards, as a special token of appreciation, we'll also be giving the recipients a book with art by Katie Hansen. Her art happens to be on the walls in the lobby right now as well, if you're interested. So, with no further ado, I'll say one thing. When I'm done, I'd like to take a moment to introduce and say a few things about each recipient before calling them up to receive their award. And when I'm done, I'm going to pass the mic to Oscar Holt, who will announce the Nanny Dresser's Preservation Scavenger Hunt Award winner with the mayor. So, with no further ado, tonight's first award goes to Larry and Leona Crawford for rehabilitating and restoring the 1880 Queen Anne Cottage at 405 Jefferson Street Southeast. It's hard to believe from the picture before you that in 2010, this house was identified as one of those that was most at risk of arson because it had been so neglected. And in the time since that, it continued to decline, despite many offers of assistance by neighbors, contractors, and staff. By the time the Crawfords purchased the house in late 2005, the porch was falling in, the pavilions on the end were falling in. Many of the house's hand-carved decorative details had been lost or would be lost soon. The house seemed like a lost cause. In the year and a half since the Crawfords have purchased the house, they've completely reconstructed the front porch and undertaken extensive repairs and improvements both inside and out. The Crawfords are commended for saving what was once considered a lost cause and transforming it to one of the Hackleman Historic District's premier landmark properties. Not sure if they're here tonight. Larry and Leona, would you please come up and accept your award? Oh, and I also wanted to add that much of the work done on this house was done by Larry Crawford himself. Wow.
I have a show and tell. Most older homes don't offer you much in reward. Hopefully, when you crawl underneath, you might find something, or in the attic. But the only thing I found underneath was a 1955 Coke bottle with the top broke out. No gold coins or anything like that. But when I was, the interior walls of the house are solid. There's no space in between, and so I had to pull off some of the wallpaper and so on. And we just take for granted lots of times the advertisement that we see, whether it's a candy bar wrapper or whatever. And I thought I'd like to show you what was behind the wallpaper. This is called sheeting. It's a muslin that was nailed up to the wall, and then layer after layer of wallpaper goes over the top of this. But what intrigued me was the advertisement on the back of this sheeting. So it's a picture of a guy riding a two-wheel bicycle, and Lotus is the company. Fine sheeting. I don't know what the LL means or the 63. I have no idea. I haven't researched that. So usually you don't find much in these older homes, but we thought we'd hang on to this. So thank you, folks. We're glad to cooperate with the city and restoring this home.
Can we see it? Can we see it too, up here on the dais? Oh, okay.
So tonight's second award goes to Glen and Shannon Kearns for the Accuity LLC storefront improvements at 436 First Avenue Southwest. Also in 2015, the Kearns embarked on a major interior renovation to make way for Glen's accounting business in their building on First Avenue. The Kearns made a few repairs and cosmetic changes to the exterior that have made a big impact along with the interior renovations. They removed the awning, exposed and repaired the boarded up window behind the awning, and repainted the entire front of the building. And as you can see from the photo, the interior is much more visible from the street, and a lot more light is in the interior now. The before and after photos highlight how simple maintenance, repairs, and a few strategic cosmetic choices can not only help extend the life of a building, can also showcase its unique historic character, but do so in a way that appeals to current day aesthetics and needs. Glen and Shannon, are you here this evening to accept your award?
The exterior actually is nice, but the interior is a whole 9-day difference.
It's beautiful. So, the last award this evening goes to John Boock for exceptional leadership in promoting local heritage and the preservation and revitalization of downtown Albany. John Boock was one of the first names that I took note of as a newcomer to Albany. Partly this was because he was somebody I learned quite quickly that everybody counted on or could count on to support a downtown event, whether that be by opening his loft up for a tour or allowing the Landmarks Advisory Commission to set up table in the wine walk or something else. But mostly it was because of what happened when his name was mentioned, what I observed in the room. The respect and warmth that people have for John Boock was palpable. It is palpable to the extent that it can change the tenor of an entire conversation. And that, let me add, and that's the hallmark of a special kind of leader that can lead behind the scenes and bring the very best out in the people and the places that surround them and lead by example. John has saved many historic buildings from the wrecking ball downtown. He's responsible for much of the art you see in the downtown area, and he has been instrumental in the success of the carousel that's soon to be open. Lastly, I would like to give a special thanks to Trapman Photography. They've agreed to let me share these photos with him, and they asked only in return that I be sure to thank John for being so photogenic and making downtown look so good. So John, please come up and accept your award.
Thank you. I just thank all of Albany and the agencies that I'm always under control. Like Josh, I knew where that happened. I did that as a favor to Oscar, the natty dresser. I told everybody who was pointing at me as a walk down the street, you'll never see me in that again. I think that's that hat, but I'll just down the street. So you gotta look at Oscar and see Anyway, thank you very much. Well appreciated.
So, a lot of folks, if they don't know John, it's just, he is such a big, strong advocate for our historic downtown and any part of our historic, structures. He has put in a lot of investment into our community. We owe John a lot for what he has done. And I even remember during the downturn of the economy, John's out there making sure we can still try to be able to revitalize downtown. He's done a lot of personal investment himself, and he is an amazing person. And if you haven't been into his collection that he has for the gift shop that's next door to Natty Dresser, you got to go in there. It's just John and his history. And it's just everything that he's been able to kind of collect over the years. He could tell you a story about almost every piece. And if you haven't been to his loft, up above, Emma's and in that block next to Sybaris, it is just beautiful. And it's a 3,500 square foot loft, and he opens it up for events, and he lets other nonprofits do fundraisers there. It is just so unique. It's just a gem. And there's so much that John has done, for Albany. And we are so grateful to you, John. And we want to thank you so much. So all of Albany, we love you. So thank you.
So before turning the mic over to Oscar Holt, I'd like to thank the Landmarks Advisory Commission for their expertise and dedication, and the private property owners who are the stewards of the historic landmarks that make Albany a really special place. Thank you. Yeah. Landmarks commissioners, if you're in the room, please stand up and be seen.
So she said she thought John could tell you something about almost everything in there. I think he could tell you something about everything in there, although most of it would be lies. So Mayor Canopa is going to choose from the winning entries of the scavenger hunt. Only 3 people got everything right, so it's a pretty quick.
You need to tuck this
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I didn't bring my glasses down, so you're going to have to read it. These have a nice natty dresser glasses, too.
Jerry. It just says Jerry. There is a phone number, so we'll give him a call. Jerry will win a gift certificate to the Natty Dresser, and what else is in here, Lisa?
Pick's Theater.
And a Pick's Theater card. So.
From the downtown.
I wonder if it's Jerry from ABA.
I don't know. It's Jerry.
Might be gerrymandered.
Now you know me.
Okay. All right, thank you. And Shauna, was that it?
I just changed my name to
Okay,
Jerry.
all right, thank you, folks. Okay, next our presentation will be from the Calapooya Watershed Council. Okay, Bessie?
Okay, good evening, everybody. My name is Bessie Joyce. I'm the new executive director of the...
Is the handheld there in front of you? Yeah, thank you. Oops, sorry, you just kind of pull it out. Yeah. Oh, there you go.
Okay. My name's Bessie Joyce. I'm the executive director of the Calapooya Watershed Council. We try to come to the Albany City Council about every year or so to just give an update and let the audience know about our existence and what we're doing in the area, and continue our relationship with the City of Albany that we really appreciate. So I'm just going to go over a few of our projects that are related to the City of Albany or in or near the city, and then also tell you a little bit about our education program. We are a 501c3 nonprofit. Our office is in Brownsville, but we cover a much larger service area, including the City of Albany. Raise your hand if you know where the mouth of the Calapooya River is. Right down here, right between Monteith and Bryant Park. Thank you. Sorry, I have an education background, so I always end up asking questions of the audience. We are completely grant funded, so we're constantly applying for funds. So we have to be very competitive. We have to be sure that our projects are going to provide enough education in the community and ecological uplift. We have habitat restoration programs. So we're working in restoring and enhancing native fish and wildlife habitat and improving water quality in our service area. And then we also have an education program. We work with the Greater Albany Public School District and 2 other districts in our service area, the Central Lynn and Harrisburg. Right now we have 5 employees and 11 board members. Like I mentioned, our service area is over 400,000 acres. It includes everything that drains into the Calapooya watershed, which runs southeast up south of the Sweet Home area, and then we also include the Muddy Creek drainage, which is between Brownsville and the main stem of the Calapooya, or main stem of the Willamette River. So we're working to treat acknowledged and science-based ecological threats. Like I mentioned, we're working to restore and enhance salmon and steelhead habitat. We work in wetlands to improve wetland conditions. As you know, many of our wetlands in the valley have been lost or disturbed due to development. We're also working in a new habitat area that science is learning more and more about the importance of oak habitat, oak woodlands and oak savannas. In the valley that, in the past, before settlement, that was a dominant habitat type in the valley, and now we have, less than 2% of that left. So in places where it's appropriate, we were looking for opportunities to go in and enhance that habitat, bring back the space around those big gallery oak trees. And of course, we're also working to improve water quality. We work a lot with the City of Albany, helping to address the total maximum daily load issues, reducing pollution to our streams, and also providing education about water quality. I do work with a stakeholder group that's based in Albany, in and around Albany, so other natural resources management groups that are doing similar projects in the area. We meet quarterly right here in City Hall and just update each other on projects and get input from advisors so that we make sure, you know, we're doing good quality projects and we're aware of other projects that are going on in the area, other grants that we could possibly partner on, and we try to keep each other in line and tuned into what the other groups are doing in the area. So one of our projects that we've had for quite a while is right in Simpson Park, right near the Talking Water Gardens. Some few years ago, we were able to successfully remove the Cox Creek Dam, and during that process, we also planted a large area along Lower Cox Creek as it runs into the Willamette River, improving that riparian habitat for native fish and wildlife species. It has been one of our more successful plantings, and we're working with the city to continue the success of that area. Simpson Park also happens to be a place where we enjoy taking many of Albany's 5th and 6th graders out to our field trips, and I'll be able to show you some pictures of that a little bit later. We are working with South Albany High School students and helping them to adopt a habitat restoration project in Bowman Park, which is the mouth of Periwinkle Creek that runs right through the city. So with grant funds, we're able to contract with a local group that helps us to do the site prep and the major part of the planting and the major part of the labor down there. So we've got that power behind us, and we're also having those kids come down and do part of the planting, do some monitoring and some invasive species control in that area. So they get to see some real restoration happening. They get to get their hands in it and be a part of that and be proud of that. We've also been working in the Oak Creek open space area, which is a 233 city-owned property in the south part of Albany, just above or just north of the Lynn Benton Community College. A few years ago, we were able to complete a habitat assessment in that area, and now we're in the process of engaging with the community there when we have time. We understand, especially in this situation where we have a nice, dense housing development that is right in the middle of this nice open space natural area. Hoping to improve conditions out there, reduce vandalism, and provide the education and guidance for those residents to really enjoy that area. We are, right now we do have funds to begin treating the yellow flag iris, which is an invasive aquatic plant. So we'll be treating that this summer as we continue to apply for restoration funds. We're also just beginning to work with a private landowner who is also in the city of Albany, out kind of at the end of 15th Street. So this is the hazelnut farm, but he's experiencing active erosion on his banks, which is the lower part of the Calapooya. So we've applied for funds to conduct an engineering study out there to figure out what would be the best thing to do to try to slow down that erosion and keep his land on his banks so that he can continue to farm, but also provide some water quality improvement and fish and wildlife habitat in that floodplain area. This is also part of the area that was assessed in a Calapooya and Albany area assessment that was completed in 2011, and this is one of the properties that was designated as a priority restoration area. Also, I just wanted to mention the photo there is a OSU environmental engineering class that came out to study that particular situation and that property and those banks that are eroding. They climbed all over the place, got in the river, took lots of measurements, and in the next couple weeks I get to go to their class and find out what they have come up with as solutions before we go into our contract with the engineering group.
So Bessie, where, is it sort of kind of the peach-colored spots? Is that where it's eroding?
Those are the worst erosion areas, yes.
So those are pretty large. Yeah.
They are. They're 300 to 500 feet long, and he's losing his soil actively. There's large pieces of the bank are sloughing off.
Yeah.
It's
a lot of people don't realize this 100-acre parcel of hazelnuts is in our city limits, so,
Yeah,
which is kind of
absolutely.
unique, but yeah.
Yeah. And this is right outside of the city, but we are continuing to work out at the Bowers Rock State Park, working with the Oregon Parks and Recreation Department. This summer, we're planning to go in and begin treating the aquatic invasive plant Ludwigia, which we're finding more and more along these types of off-channel areas along the Willamette. We're also going to be doing some engineering studies this summer to design 4 stream crossings, the improvement of 4 stream crossings. So some of those culverts will be removed. Some of them will be upgraded to improve fish access to upstream habitat. And for that Bowers Rock work that we're planning for this summer, we are going to be having a neighboring landowner information meeting that'll be coming up in mid-June. A similar project, a little bit further upstream on the Willamette, is the Truax Island State Park, or Greenway. So we're working again with the Oregon Parks and Recreation Department. And this is also similar to Bowers Rock. This is there's a gravel pit inside of the state-owned property. So we're working with Knife River as well to, as they close their permit and take out the last bit of gravel from that pit, we'll be working with them to improve the habitat of the pit so that it can be used by fish and turtles after it's not being actively mined for gravel anymore. And then in the coming years, in phase 2, we'll also be doing an engineering design to reconnect that gravel pit with Dead River, which is kind of that light blue curving line that comes down from the upper right corner of the screen. The red box there is just highlighting the area where we're also going to be replacing a culvert. The road's been washed out there for a couple years. We're going to be putting a nice big culvert in there so that it can stay and withstand the winter flooding that happens in that area. And so that's just a handful of our restoration projects and planned projects that are in the city of Albany and near the city of Albany. We also have a rapidly growing youth education program. So we have field trip programs for 5th and 6th graders. We have one in the fall called Salmon Watch, and that's where we take students upriver up to the South Santiam. And if we're lucky and if those fish pay attention to our schedule, those kids get to see wild salmon spawning in the river. And it's pretty exciting to be up there with them because some kids are just, jumping out of their clothes because it's the most exciting school day they've ever had. So this last fall we got to serve 683 students, and almost all of them are from Albany School District. As I had mentioned, this program is growing rapidly. We now have 2 dedicated education staff, and they've been expanding our program and improving our connection to the next generation science standards, doing outreach about the program, and more teachers are excited to sign up their kids. This is offered as a free service to teachers, and we can also provide some assistance with busing cost reimbursement. And we have also just completed our Springfield Days field trip program, which happens in the spring. And we'd like to get as many of those same kids out in the spring in the city of Albany. So this happens on public land at Simpson Park in Albany. And at that time, then we can talk about watershed issues that are a little more urban related, invasive species, and we test water quality. We talk and tour the constructed wetlands. And they actually really enjoy digging out blackberries. Who would have known? That program is also growing. We're adding more schools, more classes to that program. And we assist schools with outdoor school programs. So we've been working with the Central Lynn Elementary School in Halsey for a few years now. We're kind of figuring out how we would like to do that and what works for us. Our board of directors, they've really chosen an outdoor school program where we're not helping schools to send their kids off somewhere to Portland or to the beach. Those programs are wonderful. But our board really wants those students to learn more about their local watershed, local resources, and meet professionals that are working right here in their home watershed. So we're really happy to work with the Sunrise Elementary, this school, as the new school that we're engaging in our outdoor school program. And now we also have the Greater Albany School District administrators calling us up on the phone, asking how we can make ourselves more available to teachers in the Albany area as Measure 99 has passed, and more schools and more students are going to be going to outdoor schools. And this is pretty exciting because those kids get to be out there next week. We're also working in high schools. We're working in 3 high schools in Albany now with a program called the Youth Watershed Council. And this is where we go into the school throughout the year. So it's it's a little more longer term project, and then some of those students rejoin the following year, so they really get a feel for what watershed management is about, what habitat stewardship is about, and they get to adopt a project that is on public land here in the city. So again, we're working with South Albany. They've adopted Bowman Park, which is the mouth of Periwinkle Creek. This year, the Watershed Council was able to give away 2 scholarships to our seniors that have been involved in our Youth Watershed Council programs. So we were really happy to do that. And one of those scholarship recipients was a South Albany high school student. We're also working with the West Albany High School and engaging them in that Oak Creek open space. They're going to be doing some monitoring, some invasives control out there. And in the process, we hope that those students are learning of the importance of that natural area, and maybe the misuse or the unwanted use of that area will go down, and the responsible ownership and pride in that area will increase, and those students can lead the way. But we're also involved with Albany Options High School. Some of our Youth Watershed Council high school members are acting as ambassadors to our council. So they come to Brownsville when they can for our council meetings and they get to see how a nonprofit is run and provide their input on our education programs. And that's been an exciting new development with us. And we're networking with other groups throughout the Willamette Valley. We're not just, just looking inwards to our service area, but there's a lot of watershed management and habitat enhancement programs that are that we're involved in throughout the whole valley. That's going to help us to sustain long-term funding after some of our current funding sources are going to be going away in the next couple years. And I just wanted to point out that one of those regional efforts that we're looking for partners, and we're beginning to build more collaborations with other watershed management groups and land trusts and OSU and school districts is we're really looking to explore improving our own diversity, equity, and inclusion movements and learning what that's all about and how to reach a broader audience in our service area. So I'm proud to say that we're venturing into this, and we'll see what we can do. And there's my contact information. We do a lot of work in Albany. Our office is based in Brownsville, right in downtown Brownsville. Drop in and see us anytime. Check out our website. This is my email and our office phone. Is there any questions?
So we have a question from the council, so it wouldn't be for the audience on that.
Yeah, you were talking about the Bowers Rock. Are you aware that the state is trying to get rid of that? Trying to give it to Lynn County.
I'm not aware of that. No.
Happening.
I've been meeting with the Oregon Parks and Recreation staff just in the last month, and I haven't heard that, so hopefully I'll ask them about that.
Okay. Council have any questions? Okay, thank you. Thank
I
you so
appreciate your
much.
time. Thank you.
Yep, you bet, thank you. Okay. All right, so next scheduled business, this is our, on tonight's agenda is a quasi-judicial public hearing regarding a zoning map amendment from residential medium density RM to mixed-use commercial MUC as described in planning file CZ 0216. The property owner is Mr. James Winkler of WinProp 1 LLC. I call to order this quasi-judicial public hearing at 7:52 p.m. If you wish to testify, please sign in at the table next to the city clerk, and that would be Mary over here. Do any members, council members, wish to declare a conflict of interest? Do any members wish to report any ex parte contact? Yep, Bill, and then Bessie.
I received many emails over the last month or two related to this issue. If I could tell from the subject line what it was about, I deleted the email. If I couldn't tell from the subject line, I would start to read the email, and as soon as I could tell it was about this issue, I would delete the email. Now, that might sound a little strange, but under state law, it would be inappropriate to review that material because council isn't really involved in this decision unless it is appealed. And when it is appealed, the only thing we're allowed to consider is the information given to us for this meeting. Now, I don't know, but I'm going to guess that the majority of the emails that folks sent in over the last month or two is in this information. I have read the emails, and I've got a lot of questions, but the procedure can be a little strange sometime. The city attorney can address it better than I can, but it's kind of like sending an email to the judge across the street because your buddy got picked up for drunk driving and you think he's a good guy and they ought to let him go. It's not appropriate, and that's how land use laws are in Oregon. So.
And the same for me. I got the same emails probably.
Yep, I think we all got
Pretty
quite a
much
few
all of us.
emails, but yeah, on that, so. And I did talk to one of the folks in the neighborhood yesterday, and that was over the process tonight on what we usually handle for testimony and what to expect for how much for testimony. So it was over the process, but not the content, so. Okay, then do any members wish to report a site visit? And do any members wish to abstain from participating in the proceedings? And does anyone wish to challenge the participation of any council member in this hearing and decision? Okay, for those wishing to testify, please be aware that you must raise an issue with enough detail to afford the council and parties an opportunity to respond to the issue if you later want to raise that issue on appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals. testimony and evidence must be directed towards approval standards staff will describe or other criteria in the comprehensive plan or development code which you believe to apply to this decision, If the additional documents or evidence are provided by any party, the City Council may allow a continuance or leave the record open to allow the parties a reasonable opportunity to respond. Okay, at this time, I'll call for the staff reports. So David and Bob.
Before I start, I'll turn it over to Bob Richardson, our planning manager, for a few introductory comments.
Yeah, thanks, David, and thanks, Mayor Canopa. Really what I wanted to do was kind of echo what Councilor Coburn said regarding the review criteria, and thank the public that's here this evening and for participating in the public hearing process. Over on the table, I believe it's a pink paper over there, are a list of the applicable review criteria for zone change applications, which is under consideration tonight. And as Councilor Coburn said, that the council will be making a decision based upon those review criteria. And I encourage anybody from the public who would wish to testify to do their best to direct testimony to those criteria, because I think that will make your testimony that much more effective. With that, again, I want to thank everybody for taking time out of their busy lives to come and participate in the public process, and I'll turn it to David to get into details about the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Good evening, David Margot, current planner, City of Albany.
Is it on now?
Yep.
You have to stay close to it, David.
Yeah.
Okay, and speak up.
Moving forward, Jeff.
Kind of
Yeah.
tall, so I'll have to sort of bend over a little. Okay, so first, let me start with a little bit of background to bring everybody up to date and orient to this project. On March 6th of 2017, the Planning Commission held a public hearing to consider a request to change the zoning of 5 parcels totaling 12.69 acres located north of Hickory Street from residential medium density to mixed-use commercial, in part to accommodate future multifamily development. Due to overwhelming public testimony, the Planning Commission granted a request to keep the record open to provide all parties the opportunity to submit additional testimony and rebuttal testimony. The Planning Commission reconvened on April 3rd, 2017, and following deliberations, they denied the zone change application by a vote of 6-0. The Planning Commission was not convinced that the zone change was necessary because the existing RM zone allows multifamily residences, and a change to MUC did not prevent the establishment of land uses that might be seen as incompatible with the adjacent single-family residential neighborhood. According to the Development Code, if a Planning Commission recommends against a proposal, the City Council will only consider the proposal on appeal by the applicants. The applicant filed a notice to appeal on April 14th, 2017, in which they contend that the Planning Commission misunderstood the technical aspects of the zone change and misapplied the review criteria regarding the range of uses allowed in the proposed MUC zone adjacent to the abutting residential. The applicant requested a de novo hearing. Section 1.560 of the Development Code states that de novo hearing shall mean a hearing by the review body as if the request had not been previously heard and as if no decision had been rendered, except that all testimony, evidence, and other material from the record of the previous consideration may be included in the record of the review. And this explains why your council packets are so fat this week. So I'll begin the presentation with a summary of the zone change request. The Winkler Development Corporation applied to rezone 5 lots totaling 12.69 acres from RM to mixed-use commercial to accommodate future development. Again, the properties are located north of Hickory Street and Pleasant View Way. The current RM zoning allows for medium-density residential urban development. However, the RM zone limits maximum residential density to 25 units per acre. The proposed MUC zone would allow a range of commercial uses as well as a residential component for compact urban development. The MUC zone does not have a maximum dwelling unit density standard. Staff believed that the proposed zone would help promote development of infill, medium, and high-density housing adjacent to commercial and medical services served by public utilities on property that's currently undeveloped. especially given that the applicants were willing to accept a cap on the number of trips that could be generated by site development to an amount no greater than allowed in the RM zone at full build-out. So there's 5 review criteria for zone change to be considered, and these are the 5 review criteria that the staff analyzed that we are presenting here tonight. These are the criteria by which we have to make the recommendation for a decision one way or the other, and each criterion must be satisfied in order to recommend approval. The first criterion states that the proposed base zone is consistent with the comprehensive plan map designation for the entire subject area unless a plan map amendment has also been applied for. So the map on the left shows the comprehensive plan designation for the Winkler property as well as the surrounding land. For a rezoning request, the zoning of the property must be compatible with the comprehensive plan designation as outlined in the development code. There's multiple zones that can implement that designation. In this case, the village center designation, for example, include compatible zones such as RM, RMA, office professional, mixed-use residential, and mixed-use commercial. The village center comprehensive plan designation provides for a mixture of uses to serve nearby neighborhoods. These uses should include retail and residential uses and may include offices, community and personal services, and live-work units. Development within a village center will be pedestrian-friendly, fit the desired scale and character of nearby neighborhoods, and prevent the appearance of strip commercial development. Land to the north and east, you'll note on the left slide there, is designated low-density residential in the comprehensive plan. The map on the right shows the zoning of properties in the vicinity. The Winkler property abuts MUC zoning to the south and southwest, RM property to the northwest, and RS5 zone property to the east. Staff concluded that the MUC zone was consistent with the village center designation. The second criterion states that existing or anticipated transportation facilities are adequate for uses that are permitted under the proposed zoning designation. Zone changes are subject to something called the transportation planning rule. The rule requires a review of the impact that the zone change might have on the transportation system. All identified significant effects must be addressed through one of the mitigation options identified in the rule. The applicant proposes to address the transportation planning rule by imposing a cap on the number of new trips on the system. The proposed trip cap would be equal to the number of new PM peak hour trips that could be generated by development of the property under its current RM zoning designation. So the applicant provided a trip generation analysis report conducted by a traffic engineering firm. The reasonable, most intense use of the property in the RM zone would be apartments. The report estimated that the development of the property as apartments under its current RM zone designation could result in up to 192 new PM peak hour trips on the transportation system. Again, this is for the existing zone right now, if they were to build apartments on the property. So the most reasonable intense development that could occur under the MUC zoning designation is the shopping center. The traffic consultant estimated that 491 new PM peak hour trips could be generated by development of the site under the requested MUC zone designation. Maximum development of the site under the MUC zoning, therefore, has the potential to result in an additional 299 more PM peak hour trips than would maximum development under the site's current RM zoning designation. And because the MUC zone may generate more traffic, the transportation planning rule requires mitigation, either in the form of funded road improvements, amendments to the comprehensive plan, transportation system plan, or provides some other measures as a condition of development. So the applicant suggested a trip cap in order to avoid having the zone change result in creation of potential incremental impacts to the transportation system. So the trip cap would limit trips resulting from development under the requested MUC zone to the 192 PM peak hour trips that are currently possible under the site's existing RM zone. The trip cap would be ensured by recording a signed and notarized deed restriction on the property prior to final approval of the zone change. In this way, the impact of various residential or commercial uses combined are expected to be the same or have similar impacts in terms of trips to the existing RM zone. Therefore, staff believe that this criterion was met. The third criterion states existing or anticipated services such as water, sanitary sewers, storm sewers, schools, police and fire protection can accommodate potential development within the subject area without adverse impact on the affected service area. So all public utilities are currently available to the site and are adequate to support allowed uses in the MUC zone, based on comments that we received from Public Works Engineering Division. The city's water and sanitary sewer facility plans show no system deficiencies in this area. City utility maps show a 27-inch public storm drain main located in Hickory Street. This storm drainage main carries stormwater runoff to Spring Hill Drive and then on to the Willamette River. Future extensions of these utilities must be adequate to serve the development types that are possible in the MUC zone, and those will be determined at the time of land use application based on the type of development being proposed. The Albany Police and Fire Department served the property as well, and both were given the opportunity for review and comment. No adverse comments concerning police and fire protection were received from those agencies. We received a lot of public comments concerning the potential adverse impacts to area schools if the zone change was approved. The school district was notified of the proposed zone change, and the impacts to schools would be based on the number of families, really, with children living on the site. Given the present RM zoning of the property, about 300 apartment units could be constructed. The most intense scenario then would generate about 192 peak PM hour trips. So with the MUC zoning, the peak PM hour trips cannot exceed 192 based on this trip cap. The MUC zone would allow a mix of conventional dwelling units as well as things like senior living apartments and commercial development. There would be no greater impacts to schools and perhaps even less impact given the wider range of allowable uses in the MUC zone. The school district was notified of the zone change request and we received no comments. The fourth criterion states that the intent and purpose of the proposed zoning district best satisfies the goals and policies of the comprehensive plan. So what I'm showing you here is a kind of a summary of uses that are allowed in the RM zone and the MUC zone. And the RM district is primarily intended for medium-density residential urban development. Development may not exceed 25 dwellings per gross acre. Allowable uses include everything from single-family homes to duplexes to adult care homes, multifamily developments such as apartments and condominiums. Uses allowed conditionally include bed and breakfast, daycares, assisted living, community services, schools, religious institutions, parks, hospitals, and entertainment and recreational uses. Bonaventure Senior Living is a good example of a more intense type of development that is allowed in the RM zone. The MUC zone is intended to provide a mix of convenience, commercial, personal services, offices, and medium-density residential uses. The district is easily accessible to nearby residences, and commercial uses are compatible in scale and design with adjacent neighborhoods. Allowable uses include residential uses ranging from single-family to multifamily, residential care and treatment facilities, assisted living, small-scale manufacturing, entertainment, recreation, offices, restaurants, most forms of retail sales and service, nightclubs, vehicle service, and certain institutional uses such as churches or schools.
Dave, I'm not sure I understand all the nomenclature on that last slide. If you can go back.
Sure.
So I understand the categories. When you look
As far as the letters go?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. A CU stands for the uses allowed with an approved conditional use. The Y stands for the use is allowed outright with no land use review. And S means that the use is allowed through a site plan review, which is typically a staff level review. PD and CD mean either planned development or cluster development. Those would be the only scenarios by which those uses that have that designation could be allowed in the RM zone, is through something like a planned development or a cluster development. N means that the use is not allowed in that particular zone.
And S, I'm sorry?
S means that the use would be allowed through an approved site plan review, which is typically a staff level review.
And then is it CUII or CULL?
CU2 there represents, it's a conditional use, type 2, which could be a staff level decision. However, there's the opportunity for somebody to request a public hearing, and so one could be granted if so requested.
Okay.
There's not a lot of uses that are CU2s. Things like taverns, bars, and some bed and breakfasts would be a CU2 in certain zones. It's not very widely used here, so it's understandable it looks a little odd here.
So hypothetically, if the area was rezoned and somebody wanted to put in a tavern or bar, it's not automatic. There's a process.
There would be
they
a
have to go
conditional use process that they would have to go through. And there's site design standards that they would have to comply with. And in the MUC zone, it is a village center designation, so it goes beyond simply design standards for commercial uses. It also includes design standards for village center, which has more stringent guidelines as far as it being pedestrian-friendly environment, a certain amount of landscaping, more so in the parking lot, more buffering and screening, more building articulation that makes it a more pleasing environment for a pedestrian area like a village center zone. So the opportunity to get to those things would happen with the land use process, either site plan review or conditional use.
Okay, thank you.
So if it's vehicle service, can that be a body and paint shop, I suppose?
I don't know. We have the zoning code here. We can see if paint shop would be included in vehicle service.
One next door to my house.
Can we have Bob look that up and I'll proceed, or would you like me to wait?
I'm fine.
The vehicles, we have vehicle repair, and then vehicle service, quick. And a quick vehicle service use provides direct services for motor vehicles where the driver generally waits while the service is performed. Full service and mini serve gas stations are always classified as primary uses, vehicle service quick, so that would be their category. Gas station would be vehicle service quick. Use examples include, but are not limited to, full serve and mini serve gas stations, car washes, oil change places, tire repair places. It looks like we have a little bit of a difference in the actual terms between vehicle service and then we have vehicle repair. I'm not sure which that falls under.
This would have been vehicle service.
So
vehicle repair has another set of uses.
So it's really looking at the vehicle service is going to be like gas stations, oil change places, car washes, and there are exceptions. It says exceptions are truck stops and refueling facilities for vehicles that belong to a specific use, like fleet vehicles, and which are on the site where the vehicles are kept as an accessory to the use. That clear enough?
Yeah, thank you.
Here's one right here also about the back to vehicle repair. That classification is there. That does include paint shops, alignment shops, auto upholstery shops, and so on. It's a different use classification than vehicle service here.
Thank you.
Okay, so this chart here compares the development standards in the RM zone and the MUC district, such as maximum building height, lot coverage, and setback standards. Although there's differences between the zones in terms of setbacks, design standards in Article 8 of the Development Code require wider setbacks in the transition between high density and lower density uses. Because the subject properties are designated as village center in the comprehensive plan, stricter supplemental design standards apply to new development within village centers. Those standards are intended to promote a higher level design featuring development built to human scale with attractive street fronts and interconnected walkways than what you might find in a conventional commercial or residential development. One such example you would find is a setback standard such that, say, you have a building height of 30 feet along its wall, where it abuts single-family residential development, the setback from the property line would need to be equal to the height of the building. So if you had a wall that was measured 30 feet in height, you'd need a 30-foot setback. And in that setback area, you would have things like landscaping, fencing, other things that would provide buffering and screening from that use to the abutting residential zones.
So, I'm sorry, you're too quick.
I'm sorry.
So, again, for clarification, that first line item, the lot area, single-family detached.
Sure.
In the RM zone, it's a 3,500 square foot minimum lot?
Yes, if you were to create a lot in the RM zone for a single-family house, the minimum lot size would be 3,500 square feet.
And in the MUC zone, there's no minimum?
There's no minimum lot size for a single-family.
So you build a house without a yard and squeezing it in a tiny lot?
I imagine practically speaking, that'd be difficult because you'd have to provide parking for your home and there's landscape requirements. Those would act as governors as to how much your lot area would be. There'd be a point where it'd be so small it wouldn't be feasible to do something like that.
Tiny homes are going to be popular.
That's true. That is an emerging issue, yes.
How tiny is That's appropriate, I wonder. Thank you.
Okay. There's several comprehensive plan goals and policies that we felt lent the support for the proposed zone change. There's 3 of them here that I'm showing you, and I'll highlight these. The proposed zone change would create the possibility for the subject property to be developed with housing and employment choices, including high-density housing and mixed-use residential units, either in attached configurations or residential units that are located above commercial development. This combination of housing and employment choices within close proximity will create a cohesive village center consistent with Goal 3 above. So Economic Development Goal 3 is one form that we felt this zone change would advance. The second goal or policy that's listed here, the subject site is an undeveloped property that's located adjacent to a major commercial center within the village center planned area. The availability of utilities, infrastructure, and transit make the property an ideal candidate for infill development within the city. As described above under this particular policy statement, the MUC zone can be developed with the highest residential densities of any zone in the city. Encouraging high-density residential development near existing commercial and employment centers, as well as allowing for the possibility of a mix of uses within the zone, encourages an efficient land use pattern that reduces the need for travel and dependency on private automobiles and supports opportunities for public transit, which it is served out there with public transit. A third policy we felt gave strength to the application is that the fact that the proposed MUC zone is compatible with commercial developments located to the west and south of the site, such as the new medical office buildings that are going in, as well as the residential developments to the east, because future development may be commercial, residential, or a mix of both. The existing development pattern in the area, including infrastructure, allows for an expansion of mixed-use development into the subject property. The required buffering and screening standards, in addition to the compatibility detail standards and the transition standards of the development code, together help to reduce the impacts on the neighboring RS5 single-family residential development to the east. The mixed-use zone will allow for both commercial and residential development on-site, creating a transition zone between the neighboring commercial and the neighboring residential properties. The applicant pointed out, too, that the proposed zone change from RM to MUC would allow greater flexibility in the types of residential uses that could be developed. The MUC zone, for instance, allows for high-density housing that may include housing for the elderly, disabled, the homeless, or disadvantaged groups. For example, Policy 20 of the Comprehensive Plan Housing Policies encourages senior housing development to be located in village centers, giving improved access to goods, medical services, and public transportation. On balance, the staff believed that the MUC zone best satisfied the applicable goals and policies of the Albany Comprehensive Plan as required by Criterion 4 in the Development Code.
So question, you mentioned low-income housing.
I did.
Is that allowed in the RM zone?
Yes, it is. We don't, it
So
doesn't make
there's-
any distinction.
So
over
there
the
would be no
income level.
change between RM and MUC as far as low-income housing?
That, I would say that would be correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
So the fifth criterion states that the land use and transportation pattern recommended in any applicable city contracted or funded land use or transportation plan or study has been followed unless the applicant demonstrates good cause for the departure from the plan or the study. Because PM peak hour trip generation under the two zoning designations would be the same given the trip cap, the transportation system will remain consistent with the transportation plan in regard to system function, capacity, and performance. The site is bisected by a future local street identified in the North Albany Local Street Plan. Future land use applications on the site would be required to dedicate right-of-way and construct interior local street improvements for their development. That interior street system would link two existing local streets, which would be Troon Street and Pleasant View Way, and provide connections to the city's arterial and collector street system by linking North Albany Road, Hickory, and Spring Hill Road.
Question? You have a trip cap of 192.
Yes, sir.
How do you enforce it? I mean, if I sign up for 192, and okay, that's what we start with, and then we move in 300 people, what happens if it's broken? Do I have to tear my house down? I mean, seriously, how is it enforced?
The trip cap would be enforced, if you will, at the time of a development application, and that would include a land use application or even a building permit if something wasn't required for us through a land use application process. And so at that time, we would require a traffic analysis or a trip generation study to be submitted, and that would say how many trips would result, or how many trips were to be estimated to result from any proposed development. And so we would have to track that to say, given the uses on the site, there is a maximum, so we can track that by use, and that would happen every time a development application were to be submitted. And so that's how we would know what the cap was. And there would be a point where there might be, somebody could come in and say, their one use on the site would take up 192 trips, and then future development wouldn't be able to occur.
But if we do whatever it is, and it generates, we say it'll be 192, and it actually generates 250, there's nothing to change that. Yeah.
It's the same risk you have with any zoning where you're estimating transportation impacts. You may guess low, you may guess high, may estimate low, may estimate high. So you're basically matching estimates at the time of land use application. It's not an on-the-ground counting of cars.
So Bob, I think I understand what you're saying. I doubt you'd see a site plan review for the entire, 12 and a half acres. You could. In fact, that would be easy because you could look at it and say, no, we won't approve this. You're going to be way beyond 192. So if they instead come and phase it in, this is approved, this looks good, this looks good. Okay, no, this one we're not going to approve, and we're not going to issue building permits because it's clear that you'll exceed the trip count.
And this is something that the property owners of the future ought to be aware of, because this is a deed restriction that rides with the land.
Sure, and as a covenant, it was, restrictive covenant was that the developer agreed to, or the landowner. So, I guess the question is the methodology, and do you allow X number of cars per house or per apartment? To come up with 192?
There is there's a ITE, International Transportation Engineers Guidebook, that has an estimate for a wide variety of different uses. And based on that's how we get an estimate of what any type of use, how much traffic that would generate. And so I don't know what those numbers are, but yeah, if we were to look at a single-family development, we would say that's expected to generate X number of trips. And then if there were commercial development, if it's a restaurant or a coffee kiosk, we would say that's expected to generate X number of trips. And then, you add up those estimates over time, you track them, or we would track them, and you would get to a point where we'd say, no more, and we would know that, and could make that decision with a development application.
So it really doesn't have anything to do with the number of cars then? In other words, you wouldn't say a single-family home would have 2 cars, a one-bedroom apartment have 1 car. It's some kind of science, if you want to call it that to estimate the trips. How many times you're driving back and forth through the neighborhood, basically?
Exactly, and certain uses generate more trips than other uses.
During the PM peak hour.
During the PM peak
That's
hour.
the key there. I mean, many people may have cars, but they may not be driving them all at that PM peak hour. They may have other shifts, other types of activities that spread those trips out over the day.
You need to get closer to the microphone.
Sorry.
And speak louder.
Okay.
And so, we're talking about PM trips, I mean,
Well, PM peak hour.
everybody's coming home from work, is that a good interpretation of that, or?
Yeah, if you want to put it in simple terms, that's about what that means.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah,
Sure.
uh-huh.
The TSP for years and years and years has been predicated on estimating traffic counts all along for many, many years. Can you give us any time when the estimate has been woefully over or under what the estimate was when we put in a development or road structure? Is there any?
I don't have a good example of that. I'm not sure if.
Well, has it been counted?
It hasn't been challenged, but the first time we did this trip cap was with Walmart. So they came in for the zone change, but it was to be a smart center as a mall. It was not to be a Walmart. And then after the zone change came through, then here comes the site plan in for Walmart. So, and it all depends on, in my opinion, is who they hire for their traffic engineer to do a study, to what those numbers come out. I'm not keen about these trip caps, so mostly say if it is a senior facility, it could be built as an assisted living or a nursing home that doesn't have much for traffic, but then maybe sections of it gets shifted to independent living where then more people are going to be driving and have cars. So in the future, you can really hold to maybe the trip cap for a while, but not in the future. And Albany Court Apartments is an example. That was built as Kamloops as a nursing home, and then it became as a independent. And they have absolute parking issues there because then everybody drives. So it's very hard in the future to really even try to hold that use towards that trip cap. So I've just never been real keen about using trip caps, so.
So as far as public notification for the hearing, notice of the public hearing regarding this appeal was mailed on May 1st to North Albany Neighborhood Association, all 170 property owners within 1,000 feet of the Winkler property, and then others who provided verbal and written testimony at any time during the process. The staff report with exhibits was posted on the city's website on May 19th, and the site was posted May 2nd at 2 locations, at the northeast corner of Hickory Street and Pleasant View Way, and the end of Pleasant View Way on the right-hand side in the vicinity of the medical office building. And as of 3 p.m. this afternoon, we had received 11 written comments and 1 petition containing about 158 signatures asking the council to affirm the Planning Commission's denial of the zone change application.
Question, where's the 1,000 feet come from? Everybody within 1,000 feet? I read, I believe it was an email, that somebody didn't think that was far enough. So how do you come up with 1,000 feet? Is that state law, or?
Well, in our development code, we have a range that public notice would be sent out, and that range is between 300 feet and 1,000 feet at the discretion of the director.
Okay, so you went to the maximum
We went to
that
the
the
maximum.
development code calls for.
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
So, in conclusion, staff recommended that the planning commission support
Dave,
the
you
application.
need to go back one slide.
This is not, this was a draft slide, so you want me to go
Okay.
back to the.
No, I thought your conclusion was going to be what you're talking about here.
Yeah, no, that was a draft, and I had to get this down here in time to get it loaded up, so I had a couple of changes here I needed to make. So, in conclusion, staff recommended that the Planning Commission support the application, and we believe that the requested zoning designation was consistent with the site's comprehensive plan designation of Village Center. The proposed MUC zone would allow for a mix of multifamily residential and commercial development while placing people within close proximity to established commercial and medical facilities. Compatibility impacts of the new development could be addressed through requirements to comply with applicable development standards and review criteria, which would consider negative impacts to surrounding uses. Impacts to the transportation system could be mitigated by a cap on the number of new PM peak hour trips. However, the Planning Commission denied the application because they weren't convinced that the zone change was necessary, since the applicant planned to develop senior living apartments in part, which is a use that's already allowed in the RM zone. The Planning Commission also expressed concerns about the potential for incompatibility between uses allowed in the MUC zone and the abutting RS5 zone properties to the east. This concern was raised because the proposed MUC zone allows for a variety of commercial uses, and should the zone be changed to MUC, there would be nothing to prevent the establishment of uses permitted in the MUC zone that might be seen as incompatible with the existing residential neighborhood. So with that, I conclude the presentation. Did you have anything, Bob?
No, I just want to,
Can't hear you, Bob.
I just want to sort of recognize that we are in this position where there was a staff recommendation and the Planning Commission reached a different conclusion, and we want to bring that to you in kind of a neutral form so that to give you the opportunity to consider that. So I think that's what I want to say. We have respect for the Planning Commission despite continuing forward with our original recommendation. And we wanted to share their opinions as well.
So before trip caps were ever allowed then, so pretty much a lot of the developments had to do more off-site improvements for adding capacity to the transportation system. So is that something that is, you know, and it still is, it's hard, but you can have that down as a condition. Was that considered at all? Or was it just to go towards a trip cap?
I'm sorry, what was the first part of the?
It was more, instead of a trip cap, what we've done before was requiring some off-site improvements that would help to add capacity in the transportation system. So an example, when Walmart was done, then they had to do some interchange improvements. That was not on their own site, but it was off-site. They had to put in sidewalk improvements, which was on other, you know, property owners' property. Was there anything like that considered that would be adding capacity, or was it just going towards trip cap?
Yes, something like that was considered, and I will, in full disclosure, admit I'm getting a little bit out of my league here when I talk about transportation. But one of the impacts that would need to be considered were along Highway 34, or Highway 20, excuse me, and where the bridge comes over the river and then it bends. That area where there's that dip in the road and for that next stretch of traffic lanes was one of the areas that would be impacted. And that's an ODOT project, very expensive, and it was not something that was, you know, to do something like that would be a huge undertaking, more than we could really think about placing on one developer on the other side of Hickory. And so one of the solutions to think about that in terms of the transportation planning rule was this trip cap, which the transportation planning rule does allow as an alternative when you have those kinds of situations. So that's my understanding. I hope I'm not too far off on that, but that's how I understand it.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Rich?
Yes, I just want to make sure that we're, as a city, we are being as fair as we can be. The owner of the property, when they purchased the property, is this what the zoning was? Has there been a time when it was something else and we changed it? It's the same as it was before? Well, I guess I don't know.
I
who said
believe
no
the
on this.
property has been zoned RM since 2003.
Okay, thank you. I mean, if there was a situation where we had changed it, well, then maybe, we need to go the extra mile, but, I mean, it's plain, basic decision.
And mostly before that, when it came to a lot of the zone changes, and before that North Albany refinement plan, North Albany was RS10, so 10,000 square foot lots. And I'm pretty sure this area there was as residential. Yeah, Bill?
I'm referring to the entire packet with some of these questions, not specifically what you presented. Is that acceptable? Okay. So I noticed some people said it'd be nice to see a site plan, it'd be nice to see what they're doing, but that's not required for a zone change request. Is that correct?
No, we have to really look at the zone change request on the basis of whether it meets or doesn't meet the 5 review criteria.
Okay.
In some cases, people will choose to apply for both at the same time, and then you could look at the whole packet together. But in this case, with the zone change coming first, it has to be weighed on its own merits. And then conceivably, if the zone were changed, then the site plan can come in, and it could be any range of uses that new zone would allow.
So, to that point, the mixed-use commercial, I'm trying to get my arms around what's allowed, what's not allowed. One person was concerned that they could build a Walmart out there. Would that be allowed in that? under
There's
mixed
actually
use?
a limitation on square footage of buildings out there. Let's see, I can tell you real quick here, since I get to that standard.
I mean, I don't really
So-
think that's realistic, but
Well-
again, I'm just trying to get my arms around the
And
magnitude.
remember, too, that there's that governor on future development based on the trip cap, should that be approved.
That'd blow it way out of the
That would limit, that'd be one way that large commercial development would be limited.
Okay, well.
But in terms of maximum building size in that zone, if it's non-grocery, your maximum is only 20,000 square feet. If it is a grocery anchored business, it would be 80,000 square feet. And you could think of it like the shopping center where the former Ray's was located.
Right. Yeah, well, again, I don't think it's realistic, but I'm not concerned about Walmart. I'm trying to, again, get my heads around
Sure.
what that. So, there were some other concerns, various places I read, related to fill. And the best thing I want to do is just quote from an email here. High-density building in the designated area will affect the water table in the floodplain and will add to already extensive runoff behind my house. So I didn't see any mention of fill and wetlands and that type of thing. Is that something that comes up more in the site plan review?
Yes, sir, it would.
Okay, so those issues aren't really criteria that we would consider tonight?
Not for the zone change.
Okay. Again, this same individual, had a lot of good questions. Mentioned the word that dense, low-income dwelling unit will bring crime to our quiet neighborhood. But as you said earlier, low-income housing would be allowed in the current RM zone. Is that
Yes, it
correct?
would. Yep. Yes.
And so the only change to the mixed use would be you could have more apartments closer together.
Small.
Yes, but only in a combination that wouldn't exceed what that trip cap amount would be. So if conventional apartments could go in now in the RM zone, and that would trigger 192 peak PM hour trips, if you wanted more units, you're going to have to somehow compensate for that by dropping some of the development into something that generates fewer trips. So it would be maybe a combination of conventional housing with senior housing, with a beauty parlor, or a couple of things like that that would collectively not exceed that 192 peak hour trips. So there's other limits that would start applying so that you wouldn't just go and, get 1,000 units or something. I mean, there's realistic things on the ground that would have to be provided to serve that kind of development. Parking areas, there's landscape requirements, even stricter ones now that this is a village center designation.
So I think, just to kind of say that just a little bit differently too, I think what David said is accurate. But if the RM zone, say for example, would allow, say, roughly 300 units, dwelling units today, that would be the most that would be permitted of those conventional units in the mixed-use commercial zone. That would be the max because of the trip cap. And then some other type of residential use might result in more units because that would generate fewer trips. An example would be senior living housing. The senior living housing generates fewer trips, and David mentioned this before, they're also less likely to have children living there, and so impacts to schools would be less. And so kind of looking at, you might have more senior living units as a hypothetical, but you would have the same amount of trips, of vehicle trips during the
And I think
yeah.
that's part of the challenge, and Sharon made, some good points. That to a certain extent, we are dealing with hypotheticals. I can see where a person could put together a plan that would not exceed the 192 trips. But that's that day when you approve the plan and make the buildings and so forth.
Right, those are estimates. It's an estimated number of trips, and that would be the cap based on uses that would be permitted on the site. It wouldn't be somebody out there with a clicker counting and saying, okay, this is the maximum number of trips permitted between 4 o'clock and 6 o'clock, so nobody else can go in. It's based on the uses and the estimated number of trips per use.
I understand how restrictive covenants work, but, things change over time. And a good example is where I live, that there was a restrictive covenant that if you replaced your roof, it could only be with cedar shingles. When's the last time somebody used cedar shingles on their roof? I mean, so things do change. But that's all my questions at this time. Thank you.
Okay. Any councilors have any more questions over the staff report? Okay, all right.
I do, I just know better than to ask them.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so now we will take testimony from the applicant, and would the applicant please come to the podium and state your name, address, and make any comments you may have for the commission, for the council. This is the wrong script.
Mayor, council members, can you hear me?
No,
Closer.
Just pull it closer to your mouth, yeah.
Practically.
Or switch microphones.
That other one might work better, maybe. Yeah.
Maybe, probably.
Can you hear me? I'll
No.
go this one then.
Yeah.
Good evening. I'm Jim Winkler,
Okay, we can
president
hear
of
you.
Winkler Development Corporation and the principal in Winprop. And this evening isn't going to go quite as I had originally planned. I had intended to come this evening to talk to you a little bit about the site, why we view it as such a high opportunity site, and as an ideal location for workforce housing, for affordable housing, and for a concept known as senior independent enriched living. With me was going to be a principal from LRS Architects, but as some of you may have read in the Oregonian, there was a substantial fire in a substation in Portland, Oregon, Monday night. As a result, a big swath of Portland, from Cooch Street, or Davis Street, to Jefferson Street, from Broadway to the I-405 freeway, is without power. Some of those buildings are without power at this point. LRS Architects is located at the epicenter. When I was awakened at 5 o'clock in the morning on Tuesday, I was told that there was a problem and it would be resolved shortly. We were scheduled to meet to review a presentation that we intended to make, including visuals to give you a better idea of what we do plan. And what we do plan has been accurately characterized as multifamily units, and I'll tell you roughly in the amount of about 160 units with a mix of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units, and an enriched senior independent living facility of approximately 150 to 200 units. That's what we thought about doing. And in the concepts in which we developed, which are very green, very transit supportive, very much community oriented with significant robust resident services, we often have a medical clinic or a daycare center or something similar that is part of it. Hence, the request for the change in zoning was to accommodate the uses that we envisioned in a project that we would develop in likely 1 or 2 phases. It wouldn't be something that would be phased over a number of years, but it would likely be 2 almost simultaneous phases, the second one beginning upon the completion of the first construction phase. Unfortunately, because of the substation fire, which destroyed a series of transformers, the server upon which all of this is located is not operable yet. And we were told last night it would be available at 7 a.m. this morning. And they worked through the night, and they worked all day, and we thought at noon it would be available. At about noon, we contacted the planning office to ask for a continuance. And so I'm here today to ask you for a continuance and to ask you to extend the 120-day notice period so that we can return on, say, June 14th when you next meet with a fuller presentation with the kind of visuals to give you an idea of what we actually plan to do. I'm happy to answer any questions, and I'm sorry that circumstances weren't such that I could have avoided driving here tonight.
Okay, so Mr. Winkler, then if we do continue the public hearing, which we can still be taking testimony from either side of this too, would you be willing then to extend that to no limit, past the 120-day, but no limit? Because we don't know if June 14th it's even going to be available timing to have it, to have a continuance.
No limit is a long time. Could we have a 30-day?
So say like a 90-day,
Sure.
maybe?
Sure.
Okay. We can consider that. I do have a question, though. When you are stating senior independent living facility, but you also mentioned workforce housing. So which is it? That's two different housing.
2 different uses.
Right. So you're,
Oh,
so you would be...
Yes, we're envisioning
2 types of housing.
2 types of housing.
Okay.
And I might comment on something other people said. In your code, I keep hearing people talk about low-income housing, but your code provides a 15% density bonus for people at or below 80% of area median income. That's $61,200. Okay, that is not what most people think of low-income housing. Now, our firm, and people will tell you this, has been a significant provider of affordable housing. And affordable housing is generally at 60% of area median income and below. And I'm a big believer that families should have appropriate, safe housing. As a firm, we've been significant innovators in the field of environmental design, low-impact design, and as I listen to the lady talk about what she's doing with the streams and various watershed improvements, our company is Daylighted Streams. We have been recognized with a number of awards for environmental stewardship. Everything we do is green. Everything, and part of it is because we believe that families are much better off investing in their children than their local utility companies. And so we are very committed to innovative, sustainable design and very supportive of transit-supportive, pedestrian-friendly design. The big attraction to us of this site is the fact that it is bookended between medical services and shopping services, enabling families to be less reliant on automobiles, to actually walk or bike to the grocery store, to the doctor. And so that's the type of project that we would envision developing. I also want to comment on something somebody said about traffic. The best you can do is the algorithms that the engineers develop. Senior housing develops many fewer trips during a PM period than say multifamily housing, traditional multifamily housing, or single family. And as a result, you can have far greater numbers of senior housing with lesser traffic impact. And what we're trying to do is to create a mixed generation community that is of a high aesthetic standard and represents some of the most progressive thoughts on how people should live and age in place, with home services and the like that would be on the ground floor and which are commercial. And that's what we had in mind. We'd hope to present that visually tonight and bring you some images of projects, but unfortunately that's not available. So that's all I got tonight.
Sure.
So, but you're saying 3-bedroom though, up to 3-bedroom apartments, so that's usually not a senior independent.
The senior and independent would be a project.
Would be and how many units were you planning for that?
I'm thinking that somewhere between 150 and 200, perhaps a bit more than that.
And then how much for the workforce housing or the other housing that you're talking about?
I would think somewhere in the 150 to 170 unit range.
Okay, all right, so over 300 units total is what you're proposing.
And I would point out that your zone, if we were to only do workforce housing, your zone would permit 360 units, plus actually. So we didn't ask for anything in terms of increased density. In fact, with our trip cap, we asked for less. The idea of the trip cap is that you really can't do a significant commercial project, because a significant commercial project would exceed the trip cap, and then what would you do with the other 12 acres? And so it's really a fear that is misplaced. The kinds of designs that we do involve taller buildings, do involve greater density, and do involve less parking. And the idea is that less impervious surface improves stormwater drainage. That more density allows you to provide more open space. The conceptual design that we started with had about 80% more open space than required in your zoning code. We try and leave the stands of trees because they're aesthetic and they represent the values that we as a firm support. So we didn't come here asking for anything more than is consistent with your code and your city goals and the recommendation of the professional staff. I think there's been some misunderstanding, and I think some of the comments are from some of the people who oppose it are inconsistent with our objectives. And I'd hope that our visual presentation would give you greater clarity about what it was we were thinking of. Now, normally as a firm, if you're asking for a zone change, you don't go out and design something that costs a 7-figure amount to design. But what we are going to provide are some conceptual drawings that represent things that we've done elsewhere, that are the same size, similar configuration, and should give you a much better background against which to make a decision.
Okay, all right, questions? Yes, Ray?
So I'm inferring from what you're saying that the design plans, conceptual or what you're talking about, will easily fit within that 192 trip cap?
Sure. In fact, if we had considerably more, to give you an idea, and I also am not a traffic engineer, my training was in other things, but a senior unit represents roughly 0.25 trips during a PM peak period.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, other questions? Yeah, Bill?
Well, Rich had his hand up earlier, but
Oh, you still have?
I'll yield to Rich.
I didn't see anything about this in the testimony.
About what we planned?
Yeah.
I believe that I discussed it.
Is that what the planning commission got, what you said?
We made a presentation very similar to what I've said today about senior workforce affordable housing. But I didn't provide any visuals or any design, and there was some criticism from the folks who attended that they didn't know what we were talking about. There were no representations, no images. I'd also point out that not a single person other than a reporter asked me a single question. So when people are talking to you about what we plan, they're doing it without any information, I think, at all.
That's a two-way street, sir.
Oh, I understand that. I understand that.
And the second is not so much for him, but for, well, I guess you're involved. You spoke to our staff today,
I telephoned, yeah,
Yeah.
as did the architect.
and well, I guess, could we have put this off so you don't have 90 people show up? So you don't have 100 gallons of fuel going down the drain? And, I mean, it would have been a whole lot better had we done this quicker, turned it off if we could.
So,
Oh, I agree completely. That was our request as well. But for a variety of reasons, we were told that that wasn't possible and that I would come here personally and ask for
Just
a postponement.
just to answer the question for you, Rich, I guess the applicant said he came, or you made a request at noon today on this, and then when it was brought to my attention a little after 2 something this afternoon, I advised that it's a council decision on whether or not to grant a continuance. It's not a staff decision. So I think at that point, the applicant wanted an email up from the
Well,
mayor
and then
or
there's
someone, and we couldn't do
notification
that. Right.
But-
And there was-
and without knowing who's coming, how would we notify them?
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
well, I'll throw in my 2 cents. I left at 4 today, a little early. I heard about it, I got a phone call a little after 4 saying, what do we do? And at that point, it would have been impossible to
Right.
reach out to the public and to inform everyone, and just didn't seem to make much sense.
And
Karen,
as
I had a
callers,
couple questions.
we've continued hearings many times, yeah, Bill?
I see a value in continuing it. I mean, it's great that we can hear from the public tonight, so your time's not wasted. But I see a value, in reading the emails, as I mentioned earlier, I think there's a lot of concern from people that they don't, the fear of what's going to be built. Again, I keep looking at this same email where the individual is concerned that they could build a Walmart, a Burger King, or a nightclub. Giving you the opportunity to present conceptual ideas of what you're going to do, it sounds like you're primarily wanting to have the flexibility through the zone change to have, like a medical clinic or a daycare.
Perhaps at the ground level of an apartment project.
Right. So, question for Bob or Dave, is that something that could be allowed with a conditional use permit or not?
In the current?
In the current RM zone? Well,
On the first level.
the
Microphone.
testimony, the indication is here that the reason they're seeking the zone change is to have some flexibility for developing something like a medical clinic or a daycare. Would that be allowed as a conditional use with the current RM zoning, rather than going for a zone change?
Well, I'm wondering too, could there be a doggy daycare there? Would that be appropriate in that zone?
The reason I'm asking is it seems reasonable if I'm living out there in a multi-story senior care facility that on the ground floor there's a small medical facility that might be a plus. If I'm in workforce housing and have small children, some daycare a block away so I can go to work, might make sense. I mean, it's good for discussion, but anyway.
Yes, sir. So daycare centers would be allowed in the RM zone through a conditional use. And certain community service uses as well would be allowed in that zone, but probably not a medical office.
Could we make it?
It
Could we
would take a
push the edge of
development
the
code
envelope?
amendment perhaps, but it might be something that could be considered.
So then, another question, and it's Mr. Winkler, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. I think there's 5 tax lots involved?
Correct.
Is there an opportunity, or have you looked at just rezoning 1 tax lot that would allow you to do the commercial development you want to do?
That's a very interesting question. I think the way that we would do it, if you're suggesting some sort of compromise, for example, is that we would map out for the schemes that we've considered the areas that are closest to the shopping center where we would locate the senior housing and designate that as MUC. Now, were we to do that, we would probably not want a trip cap, because the trip cap was intended to assuage the concern of citizens that we're going to build a Walmart. Because a Walmart really does involve thousands of trips. And as someone who has built a number of senior housing projects, the principal trips in senior housing are from daughters visiting their parents and family caregivers. And we could theoretically consider that as a compromise, and we could come back, if you'd like, next time we're here with some other configuration that represents that kind of configuration.
And again, I wasn't really offering it as a compromise. I'm more just trying to understand, some of the reasonings for the request of the zone change. And of course, it'll be helpful to see your conceptual plans to get a better visual of what you intend.
Originally, one of the big reasons for the request was from the pre-application notes. We understood that in senior housing, any one-bedroom or studio unit would require one parking space plus an additional parking space for every 4 units for visitors. And for those of us who are interested in senior housing, we usually look at much smaller parking ratios. And the real constraint, by the way, is not unit count. The real constraint in your code is the amount of area that has to be allocated for parking. And so as someone who's interested in something that is pedestrian friendly and recognizes the value of the close proximity to medical and shopping, your parking requirements seemed exceedingly high. And so that was a driver. Now, it became clear subsequently that you had modified your parking code to make it more consistent with our expectations, but that wasn't in our initial package. But parking is a big driver, and the flexibility to put it where you want it is a big driver of the zone change request. But really, it's about the flexibility to do a 21st century project that tries to respond to our perceived needs, our perception of the needs of the community. And in the senior community, we know that there are better outcomes if you have clinics on site. Even in family housing, we've discovered that having medical services on site makes a big difference. Having robust community resources on site makes a big difference. So we have always tried to link services and housing and to restrict the number of parking spaces. And if ever there was a case in a suburban area for restricting parking, it's here. There is the park and ride, there is the shopping center, and there are the medical services, so that one can come up with a pretty good reason why someone would want to be close to a grocery store and close to medical, particularly if they were elderly.
Thank you.
Yes, looking at your map that we had on the screen a while back, it's divided into several different parcels. And would you consider the parcel next door to the people here who live in an R5 zone, would you consider zoning that parcel R5?
I would think in terms of zoning that as it is, because if I understand your question, there are 11 houses along...
Because your development, you're telling us, is going to be just wonderful next to an R5 zone.
Right.
Why couldn't you have...
More houses?
Well, have that, yeah, and leave it empty as an R5, and I'm sure a developer would come in to be just tickled to death to build houses right next to your development.
We are...
And that would satisfy these people, that their neighborhood would extend on.
I own the R5 site next to it, the undeveloped RS5 site. And that site, I will commit to develop a single family. There's an RS5 site next to this.
Okay.
Between this and I own that. And that
and
is...
it's undeveloped.
It is undeveloped, and it is scheduled to be single family. If you're referring to the lots next to,
I
I
wish we
believe
had
there
the
are
map
11
up here.
houses along the border.
Yeah, David, maybe you can pull that up. I know it was early in your presentation.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
The one on the right, or either
I
one of them.
believe there are 11 houses against the most northerly and easterly lot.
Yeah.
And that is a lot on, and the
The
lot
three,
next to
there's
it.
3 lots there on the top, and the one on the right-hand side.
Right, the
Could
one
that-
on the
could that be
right-hand
R5?
side, that is what you're talking about.
And it's presently R5?
No, it is presently RM.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
And you were saying it was R5.
No. I'm sorry if I misunderstood you. The yellow rectangle that is next to the most easterly and the most southerly lot, that is the RS5.
The one that's right above that lake there, whatever it is.
Yeah, the one right
Yeah,
above the lake.
Trapezoidal one.
Yeah, Dick's colorblind, so that doesn't help when you see the yellow. But you didn't know that, so.
Well, I can see, I can tell the difference. Yes.
But that one will be single-family.
So-
It is, and it will remain
But
so.
that has no effect on the people that presently have single-family houses in the neighborhood that's there.
Right. I think when you see what we intend to do and how we plan to mitigate the effect, I think you'll understand what we have in mind. But the concept of...
Somehow a 5-story apartment house doesn't,
Well, I think that would not be a 5-story apartment house. I think the 5-story apartments...
next to your R5 lot.
No. They would be clustered, and this is why I much prefer doing these things with visuals, but they would be clustered closest to the shopping center.
Okay.
What's clustered? The apartment house?
The senior housing would be taller, and the senior housing would be closer to the shopping center. The workforce housing would be shorter. It would be 3 stories, and it would be on a perpendicular to the housing, but closer to the single family. And I think that a visual would help. Unfortunately, I don't have the thumb drive. I do have some concepts on my pad, but...
And again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that everything you're proposing is currently allowed under RM, with the exception of the medical clinic or daycare.
And until recently, the parking that we envisioned.
Recently, the what?
And until recently, the parking, I think, because under the, it's unclear to me. The notes from the pre-app indicated that we had a greater parking need than I think is the current code, but...
Well, and the reason I mention that, and again, I'm anxious to hear from the public, but you talked about that, the east side of that property towards the existing homes could be or would be 3-story apartments.
Yeah, that's what we envisioned.
And I heard some groans in the audience, but I want everyone to understand, that's allowable now. So.
No, you're quite, the lady who said not as many is...
Right, different setbacks and not as many, but.
No, I don't think not as many. I think that given the trip cap, we can build more. That's what people don't understand, because the trip cap is based on your zone without any bonuses for workforce housing. The workforce housing bonus is 15%. Your solar bonus is 5%. One can build significantly greater numbers of units than we have proposed.
You know, Mr. Winkler, I totally understand your concept. I think you're underestimating, though, what would be reality when it comes to parking. So, and I don't know if you have been informed, but we are looking at redoing our parking requirements for multifamily, because what we're finding 50 years ago, what our requirements were for parking does not fit for today. So when you have, say, a 3-bedroom, we're getting people that are cohabitating, and you might have 3 single people, or you might have 6 single people in a 3-bedroom, and then they all have cars. So I don't know what kind of market study you've done, but I would really don't hold to it that you think there's going to be less parking. That would be
We
needed.
generally do not do roommates. We do families, but and
Yeah.
we have a lot of experience with building apartments.
Okay,
And
yeah.
what we're finding in our experience is actually that it goes the other way.
Okay, well, but Portland is different than Albany, so.
Yes, perhaps.
I know quite a bit the way our patterns are, you know, when it comes to housing. So I understand your
But where we
concept,
are-
that'd be ideal, but I'm not quite sure that would play out in.
I do want to
with your
stress that
concept.
where we're thinking about less parking is in the senior, not in the family.
Okay, yeah. All right, any other questions of the applicant? Okay, thank you.
Mayor, can I just make a clarification, please, before we proceed? And I'm going to ask Bob to correct me if I misspeak or am not as clear as I otherwise should be. When we're looking at a zone change request that is not being submitted in concert with a land use application for development, the council is, and staff is in the position of reviewing the application in strict context to the review criteria, which are applicable to anything that might otherwise be built under the zone that exists and the one that is being proposed. So while the description of what might be built by the applicant might help provide clarity or comfort to some individuals, it's not enforceable. We can't condition it, and it is possible that it could be sold and developed in a different manner. I'm not saying that it will be, and I'm not taking one position or the other. I just want to make sure that everyone understands that we can't condition what might be shared to be developed.
That's why we have zoning.
Right, that's why we've had that scenario happen several times too over the years. But yeah, thank you, Jeff, for clarifying that. Okay, so we will now be taking public testimony. As I recognize you, please come to the podium, state your full name and address, spell your last name, and make any comments you may have for the council's consideration. If anyone wishes to enter an exhibit into the record as part of your testimony, please briefly describe it and then present it to the city clerk. Okay, so we did have several people that had signed up. And I do know that I can see some that are as sort of duplicate out of the same household. What I would sort of suggest is, I know it's getting sort of later in the hour, and we want to make sure everybody gets a chance to make sure they bring their concern forward with this application. So if you have already submitted a letter, we have already read the letter, so maybe if you want to just come up and state your name, whether you're, against the project, and just say, I did submit my letter that way. So, and then, mostly make sure that you pertain your comments to that list of criteria on that. So that's very helpful with that. And I could, if you're not wanting to come up forward too, and when I do call a name, you can just wave and just say, I'm here, but I'm against this, and just have it down for the record. So whichever you choose on that. Okay, so the first person that signed up was John Lehman. Yes.
Hello, I'm John Lehman. I live at 938 Troon Street. My last name is spelled Layman. And my wife and I have reviewed this staff report, and I sent you a 5-page letter. So I won't repeat everything in the letter. Mr. Winkler got dangerously close to hinting at the truth. The PM trip cap, and this is the first time I've used that term, but it's about a short period of time in the evening. It's a cap on the number of cars during that short period of time, but it says nothing about the cars at 3 a.m. or the cars at 3:30 in the afternoon, when this particular commercial use might have its PM peak. So that 192 cars, which by the way is quite a few in an hour, is not the worst it could be. It could be much more, but not at the PM peak. So there are ways to game the system, like having your factory dismiss at 6 p.m. I think it was kind of deceptive to say that RM and this commercial zoning had the same allowances for affordable housing. because in affordable, that implies that you have to be able to build it inexpensive enough that you can afford to rent it for less money. So that implies greater density, which is what this commercial allows. It also implies lower quality materials. So it's something I'd like you to consider. If we're talking about affordable housing, it might not be what we're used to seeing in North Albany. I wanted to talk to you about the staff report that's unsigned and unapproved, and that's kind of unusual for an engineering report, that it wouldn't be signed. It talks about three pathways for traffic. Through Troon Street, which is a very small residential street that has parking on one side, and it connects to two other residential streets that are equally crowded. That's not really a great plan to send a bunch of cars down those streets, or to send them through the existing mall, which has speed bumps and structure, and that's equally not a sensible plan to send cars through. And the third is through Northwest Pleasant View Way, which currently is a dirt path with some restrictions on it, as far as I know. One other. I wanted to talk about drainage because it's important to me. The drainage for my property isn't so good. Every spring, you can walk out in my lawn and sink 1.5 inches into sludge. The neighboring property that's right behind my house, much of it is wetland. So to build this great big community, they're going to have to bring in fill dirt. And that's going to impact me and my neighbors. So I'd really like you to consider the impact on us for that. Mr. Winkler hinted at a site layout. This is from Mr. Martineau's file, so he has the original, but I'd be glad to leave it with you. But it's a layout showing 11 3- and 4-story buildings literally jammed into this property with less than 20% or about 20% that is not concrete or asphalt. It's just a nightmare as far as green space or living conditions. I would like to submit that into the...
You can hand that to the city clerk, too.
Let's see. I think I'll leave it at that. I would appreciate if you'd review my letter one more time.
Okay.
My wife and I spent quite a bit of time on it. And also the survey of 146 people or so isn't just a survey. It has 5 pages of factual concerns of my neighbors. And we are in fact concerned. There weren't 144 against and 2 for. Everybody in the neighborhood is very much against this kind of development. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lehman.
I've got some questions.
What, Bill?
Mr. Lehman, I've got some questions, sir.
Yeah.
Again, I think Jeff Blaine made a good point, and I mentioned earlier that our task as the judge and jury here is to focus on the criteria. And so, while it's a learning process for all, including me, because I'll be learning more about land use rules and regulations, every day when other projects come up. So I'm not trying to demonstrate that I have all the answers. I'm seeking answers. So I'm going to pick your brain a little bit. You mentioned the drainage, and that's something that I had brought up because I did read the concern of several people. But as I understand it, we can't consider that as part of our criteria. It's something that would come up in a site plan review.
I understood you absolutely had to consider it as part of criteria 3, that storm sewers would have to be considered.
So I would want to get, thank you. So I'd want to get some follow-up from staff, Bob, if you and David can make a note of that, because I would want some clarification on that issue. The traffic, again, I appreciate your concerns going through the neighborhood and so forth. On one hand, 192 cars is 192 cars, regardless if it's RM or MUC. However, there has been a discussion about, how you enforce that in the future and so forth. Again, for me, I'm really trying to focus on what's going to be different if this is, if it's approved. If it's not approved, I think you're still going to have a lot of cars through the neighborhood. If they just leave it RM and he develops according to what's required there. No, I understand. You're still going to have the 192 cars if this zoning change is not approved.
But the MUC would be a higher density.
Yeah.
I understand.
Bill, we can't have people from the audience, so thank you.
So-
You did your time,
Again, if it's not approved, it's going to be 192 cars through the neighborhood, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So there's still an issue with traffic.
It's going to be a cap of 192 cars, limited by whatever the planning department approves.
In
So
the RM zone.
In the RM zone, it could go up to 192 cars.
Right.
So using that as the baseline for this new project is saying, well, we're going to take the worst it could possibly be today and then use that for comparison on this new project.
Gotcha, that's a good point.
Certainly not something we'd like to see.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Well, no, I have more questions, if that's all right. Just, again, for clarity, you mentioned cheap houses and cheap material. That could be done in an RM zone, correct?
If you could sell it.
Yeah, so I don't know that that's specifically a criteria. And then I don't know, again, a good question for staff. You mentioned that you build 11 to 12 three-story buildings. I don't know how many three-story buildings could be built in the RM zone. So again, for comparison, staff, I'd be curious to know eventually what could be built there.
The difference is density.
No, I understand
In the
the
RM,
difference.
you must have 30% green space, and in the commercial, you can have only 20% green space. And the density of apartments, they can be 600 square foot apartments in a affordable housing project in a commercial area, whereas RM requires a minimum size, 25 units per acre, which is actually pretty generous. That can be
That was the maximum.
2 and 3 bedroom houses.
Yeah.
Or apartments.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate your input.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next person who signed up is Mary Arnold. And also, folks, if we can also refrain from clapping also, that's a part of our rules for public hearings too, so we appreciate. And then I do know it's hard to, one of you might want to kind of interject and be part of the conversation, but that's not what the public hearing process is all about, so I hope you understand on that. Okay?
Well, thank you, and good evening. So my name is Mary Arnold, and I live at 994 Northwest Troon Street in Albany, and spell my last name A-R-N-O-L-D. And I'm here to speak to two criteria, primarily the transportation and the drainage. The transportation impact analysis refers to a worst-case scenario that the rezoning would culminate in a large shopping center with an additional 491 peak hour weekday trips. In fact, this proposed change would allow up to 1,200 living units to be built if these 12 acres are rezoned to mixed-use commercial, MUC, which allows up to 100 units per acre. At just 1 car per unit, the potential impact is 1,200 more trips AM and PM. The numbers used for the worst-case scenario simply do not add up, and the proposed trip cap, while it's a positive aspect of this proposal, but I'm unsure how such a trip cap was calculated, although I have to say I learned a little more tonight, and it seems far too low for this proposed change. The biggest question remaining to me is how will such a trip cap be enforced? The proposal also indicates that Troon Street will be open to the east, allowing traffic to enter and exit the area directly to Spring Hill Drive. The streets in the North Point subdivision, specifically Murfield, which provides the most direct access, are narrower than standard city width. Parking is allowed on only one side of the street, and the area is congested with cars. I have personally watched emergency vehicles trying to navigate the tight turns on these streets as valuable response time is ticking past. I have 2 elderly neighbors. There are many children in our neighborhood, and opening up the neighborhood through traffic in order to mitigate the impact on other streets will be a hazard to children and families and people in need of emergency services. The traffic on North Albany Road and Spring Hill Drive is heavy, increasingly so as more and more homes are built on Gibson Hill. Leaving the North Point subdivision is very difficult at times. In fact, I timed it this morning. I sat for 6 minutes to turn right out of the subdivision onto Spring Hill. Adding this type of density to such a small space is going to create immense traffic problems to the whole area. All of the traffic heading to Albany has to funnel through North Albany Road or Quarry Road to Spring Hill, and then over an increasingly burden bridge into downtown. I no longer try to drive into Albany between 4 and 6 p.m. because the traffic is so backed up at that time. The rest of the traffic heads to Corvallis, which is bumper to bumper most mornings and evenings. I drive this daily. And in fact, today, if I was a texter while I drove, I was tempted to take a picture of my speedometer with the long line in front of me where it said 18 miles an hour as we headed towards Granger Road. So it is very slow. The developer recognizes that there will be, and I'm quoting, uncertainty and difficulty in providing mitigation measures sufficient to offset the transportation system impacts. That was from the staff planning report under the proposed zoning change. It would be good for members of the City Council, and I do invite you, to make a visit to North Point to see this situation firsthand. And then just briefly, I'll speak to the drainage. The property lies between the Willamette River and Thornton Lake, which at one time was the main channel of the Willamette River. A 2011 AMC study revealed significant unmapped floodway through North Albany, which is an overflow channel of the Willamette River. As a result, a large portion of the proposed rezoning property has recently been added to the 100-year floodplain. The force of the water in this type of flood is estimated at 5 pp per second, and that rate, with very little depth, can apply enough force to push a car off the road. The reason why that's important to us is that our property abuts the northeast corner of the proposed zoning area. Our property is no longer considered in the floodplain, primarily due to the fill that was brought in upon which we built. However, this means that our home is surrounded by a steep bank to the north and northwest that leads to a bioswale, which in the winter is filled with water. The bank is not stable. As our fence has continually slipped, the bank has moved, showing the bank has moved. And despite being built up, the drainage on our property is largely impervious. Additional water drainage onto our property will have a large negative impact on the stability of our property and our home. The trees we have attempted to plant along the fence towards the proposed rezoned property have all died due to excess water, and this despite the installation of French drains. So in addition to the unknown but likely increase in drainage issues, we are currently not able to plant a buffer between us and the proposed development. The Albany Planning staff reports that proposed zoning change could potentially result in an increase in the amount of impervious surface for development on subject properties, and that impervious surface will drain onto ours and into our bioswale. So I will leave it at this, that adjacent residential homes, while we know that there was always going to be residential development there, it's not about not wanting to develop this property. It's about developing it consistent in a way that doesn't overburden our transportation and our drainage, and that matches and respects the neighbors who are already there with the type of homes that we purchased at the height of the market and that are now only now regaining the property values that we bought 10 years ago. And I'd like to echo one last thing, that there is nothing to stop the developer, Mr. Winkler, from selling this property as soon as it is rezoned, leaving it open to all types of commercial development. So while I'm intrigued by his proposal of a beautiful senior citizen housing development, I'm a social scientist, I work with children, I'm all for children and families. But that is not what he's asking for now, and any plans that are being presented are presumptuous because it hasn't even been approved yet. So I would like to just keep the two issues separate, that the zoning change comes first, and then we have to talk about what's being developed. So I'd like to thank you for your time and your hard work and for representing the people of Albany. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, thank you, Mary. Next is Ashlyn Walker. Did I get that right? Oh,
I'm looking at it.
Oh. Yeah.
Okay. I may borrow it in a second.
Yeah.
My name is Ashlyn Walker. I live at 347 Benton Drive.
I think you need to put the mic closer.
A little bit
to you.
closer?
Yeah,
I haven't had
thank
to speak
you.
into a mic for a long time. Okay, Ashlyn Walker. I live at 347 Benton Drive. Just here to give you some notes today. I don't have anything specifically written out because I find as I listen to all of this, it changes so quickly. What I like to do is boil things down. We're talking about whether or not we can add the commercial component to this property. I don't think it's necessary, and that's where I want you to consider. And that's what that little thing down there that turned out to be bigger than I intended, so I apologize. Am I too far away still?
Maybe tilt it down. I think it might be.
Down?
Yeah, just move it closer,
Better?
just move it real close to your mouth. Just move the whole base.
The whole thing?
Eat it. Yeah.
Oh, gosh, okay.
Perfect.
We got to get new
I like to
mics.
boil things down. The difference that we're looking at, as we've kind of hinted around, is whether or not we're going to allow those commercial parts to potential apartment housing. I don't think it's necessary, and that's where I'm going with this. And I like visuals, so there you are. I went up and down Hickory Street and just looked at all of the potential commercial development that is available within walking distance already. Number one, there's a huge list on this of all of the amenities and businesses that are currently available. The two largest shopping or village complexes that are already present are not at capacity. There's more than ample opportunity to fully build out or fill up that space prior to allowing additional commercial development so close, okay? Most of those, well, the pictures I've taken are all of the completely undeveloped lots adjacent to all of those areas. I put the little map in the middle. Like I said, it ended up being different than I wanted. And I also have a list here, if you want to look at it, of all the businesses. I literally drove up and down the road and listed all of the businesses that are currently available. Now, granted, even North Albany Village, which is already a village center located adjacent to the property that we want to change, or we're discussing changing, can't even support the anchor store there. It's been gone for a couple of years now, and we're looking to add to that. We also have significant development from Samaritan. That is all within walking distance of this property. I don't see the need to change the zoning and to include additional commercial development in that area. I have a whole bunch of other stuff, but in the interest of time, I think I'll leave it there.
All right. So Ashlyn, you'll need to leave what you have there
That's fine.
for testimony and the pictures, if that's
That's
okay.
fine.
What we can do is we can get a photos taken of it for our record and get that back to you if you need them. So, but yeah, if you can leave that and
I think
we can get that.
virtually all those pictures are in our packet, in the black and white
Oh,
photographs.
okay, yeah. So if that was already submitted, then would it be, will you need that, Mary, or can she take it back?
So are you saying that all the pictures that are on the storyboard are already in the packet?
I didn't submit it for this one. I wrote a letter, which I would have revamped. I would have liked to have revamped and sent in, but unfortunately, it just, life has not allowed for that this month.
All right. Yeah.
So if you got the letter from the last one, I do think the pictures are included in there. from
Started
the-
on 194.
Okay.
The one from the previous,
All
the
right.
planning
Would
commission
you prefer to
submission.
have that left here?
I would not like to try to figure out how to archive that, so.
Yeah.
If the pictures are already in the planning, that's fine, but if you want to leave it, we'll take care of it tomorrow and we'll get it back to you.
Either way, that's fine.
Okay, all right, okay, thank you.
I think that's it. Any
Thanks.
questions for me then?
Okay, all right, next is Lee and Sue Cutsford. And I think you did submit a letter too, it's in the packet, yeah.
Last time I blew everyone out. How am I for sound?
That's good.
You're fine. Okay.
Yeah.
Lee Cutsforth, 831 Ritter's Lane, spelled Cutsforth, last name. I submitted a letter. We have a roadway already, an easement that goes across the east side of the Winprop development. He's proposed, or in the staff report, it said they proposed to connect to Troon, which a lot of people are against here. I'm just going to say, I don't know, with my roadway there, he has to cross it at least twice to put this road in. Just want to know where I am in all of this. My road actually goes clear out to Hickory. So it's about 1,600 feet long, which covers a lot of his territory. Some of it is Samaritan in front. Anyway, you've got my handout, so I'll close now.
Okay.
I'm Sylvester. It's S-U-E, and the last name's spelled exactly the same.
You'll need to move it forward, yeah. Sorry.
First,
That microphone got turned off, ma'am.
Oh.
You can turn it back on.
you never have a problem.
And now it needs to be turned down.
Down.
Yeah.
Oh, short and squatty, that's me. First, I just want to say that I appreciate the time and effort that you're giving, we, the people of Albany. We make the city. We are the people who make the city. We live here, we shop here, we send our children to schools here. We choose to think of this as home. So I want to publicly thank you for the job that you do. I think that you very often don't get thanked enough, but I want to thank you.
Oh, thank
So,
you, Sue.
first of all, I think the greatest fear of all is the fear of the unknown. And that's what we have, is multiple unknowns. We don't know what's going to be put here. We've been given a line of what-ifs, but no certainties. The developer lives in Portland. He's a business person. His bottom line is profit. He wouldn't be in business if it wasn't to make profit and money. We're here as residents, as people of Albany who want to stay here and live here, send our children to school, and be safe in our surrounding environment. The last developer, Pete Snook, who was also an out-of-towner, went bankrupt prior to fulfilling his grand plan. He left promises unfulfilled and families in that area landlocked. And they found out that they were landlocked when they went to sell their property, and the banks told them that they could not because they had no access out to either North Albany Road or Hickory. And so truth is stranger than fiction, and we have a great deal of fear. And I am fearful that what is once stated in front of all of us doesn't come to fruition. So what has been placed before this community, we the people, is unlimited possibilities of noise pollution, air pollution, water pollution, schools overflowing, overwhelming demand on police and fire departments, questionable erosion control, pedestrian safety, traffic versus child safety. But I want a point of clarification. I want to make a point of clarification. By receiving no comments in no way means no problem. Do not misconstrue meanings by what is just thrown out haphazardly by verbiage. So I will not say anything more, and I'll hand in my paperwork. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If my memory's correct, I think the two of you were also part of our North Albany refinement plan from 2003, too, as being longtime neighbors in that area. So.
1989.
Yes, yeah. So, thank you. Okay, next is Steve Durnan. And I believe, Steve, you submitted a letter, too, for the record, yes.
My name's Steve, can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
I haven't spoken in a microphone in a long time either. My name's Steve Durnan, along with my wife Lori. We live at 966 Troon, which is a residential property directly abutting one of the parcels involved in this rezoning consideration. Both my wife and I attended the previous planning and zoning meetings, and we've submitted written testimony both for the Planning and Zoning Committee and for this meeting here this evening. So I'm at least partially guilty for the size of your packet. We'll apologize for that, but hopefully you've had a chance to read that material, and it's in the public record, as I understand. And so I will not, take the time to go back through that. I only just say, actually, just a couple of things, and they've already been hinted at through all these conversations. But through all the public comments on this proposal, there have been numerous important issues that have been raised to include traffic, floodplain and environmental concerns, public safety, the impact on community resources, to include schools, police and fire protection, density and permitted uses, and the impact on surrounding property values. I would support all of these issues and believe they are the result of the real-life concerns of what is really a substantial group of people that have come together, concerned neighbors and citizens, to produce this kind of information. This is an impressive community effort. I think a lot of people have come together, and I hope you appreciate that. Secondly, I would say I don't believe that the developer has made any serious effort, at least that I'm aware of, to address any of these multiple concerns, save the trip cap restriction. That's already been talked about. I have similar concerns myself. I think you could enter a trip cap in good faith at the beginning, and 10 years from now, I'm not sure how these kinds of restrictions can be enforced, and I think we've already had that conversation, at least in part. So what may start as a reasonable idea can end as a problem. So I just summarize by saying, I've been through all the public hearings, I've read all the testimony, at least that I was able to get my hands on, and I've yet to really hear a substantive argument for why the underlying zoning needs to be changed. The existing zoning appears to be more than adequate for the developer's announced intentions. The fact that the underlying zoning appears adequate, coupled with the fact that numerous undeveloped properties already zoned to MUC exist in the immediate area, would seem to require a very strong argument for making the zoning change, especially a change that allows for considerably greater density and permitted uses. So I've just yet to hear that argument be made, but I've heard from my neighbors and many others an argument that I believe can be sustained. So I would just ask that you deny this request and that you support the Planning and Zoning Committee's decision. And with that, I'll wrap it up.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Steve. Thank you. Next is Jonathan and April Rich.
My name is April Rich. Can you hear me?
A little bit closer.
Get it closer to your mouth.
It's off, I think.
You'll have to talk loud.
Turn it.
Oh,
On top.
To test me, it's late.
There you go.
My name is April Rich, R-I-C-H, 957 Belden Lane Northwest.
I'm Jonathan Rich, same address, same spelling.
We'll be brief as we have a child who wants to go ride the cannon out there.
Oh.
I did call the district office. I'm speaking to the schools and their capacity. And they told me Oak Grove Elementary is currently at capacity, and they're going to grow next year. I understand a bond was just passed, yay, but that's not going to completely address the growth, 100%. Fir Grove has some room for kindergarten, maybe about 25, which would be a new class. North Albany Elementary, they could maybe fit 25 students. That's if they open up another kindergarten room. So they're at capacity 1st through 5th grade. West Albany, 30 students approximately they can accept. And they do project growth for next year. So our schools are really at capacity. I can tell you, as somebody who volunteers in the classes, they are full. And this is numbers from the district, but as a parent who walks into that class, the teachers are doing the best that they can with those kids, but there are a lot. And I don't know what we would do with the growth. That's all.
Nope, that's it.
I can't.
All right, thank you. Next is Rebecca and Shannon Seltz.
I'm Rebecca Seltz, and I live at 242 Muirfield Avenue, Northwest. And you spell my last name S-E-L-T-Z, as in zoo. I am a teacher in the district, and I also wanted to talk about the educational needs of the kids. If the zoning were to change and the projected number of families was to exceed what's there already, yes, we would have huge problems. The bond did pass. It will not add one single classroom to North Albany Elementary, which is the closest elementary school. It will not add one single classroom to the middle school or high school. The bond money is allocated for facility upgrades, energy improvements, vocational technical classes, which has to do with providing avenues for students to explore careers. It doesn't add any block class, the core class room size. Sorry, I'm really nervous. I can tell you that I used to teach at North Albany Middle School, and before they built Timber Ridge, which eased some of the crowding, our class sizes got up to 40. And when you take 40 students, 40 teenagers, and squeeze them into a room that was made for 25 or 30, we had to pull out the desks from the classroom, and we had to replace them with tables about that size and put 4 or 5 kids per table. I literally, if somebody had to move across the room, somebody had to stand up, move the chair for somebody to get through and put it back. That's a safety hazard. Not to mention that my teaching with 40 14-year-olds, 30 of which were boys in one of my classes, became a lot more about babysitting than educating. With the current bond money, that's what we'll be looking at, because there will not be more classes built. There will only be increase in class sizes. With the exception, we are building a new elementary school, but it's to replace a dilapidated one. They are adding a few classrooms up at Oak, but that's to accommodate current overcrowding. And the school district did their own population growth study that is projecting only a growth of 500 kids over a 5-year period. And our school district also encompasses Millersburg, which a lot of people know is exploding right now. There's also some new construction going on in North Albany. So even without the change in the zoning, we're going to be hard-pressed to educate these kids. I also wanted to mention something about the medical services that was mentioned by Mr. Winkler, that he liked the idea of the services being there. I can tell you, I've used a lot of these services. I've been to the urgent care multiple times. Everybody in my family has. And we have used the physical therapy place, and we've also used, myself, the mammogram services. They're booking out months ahead of time. It is not like you can just get right in there. They're already serving at capacity. So to say even for the senior buildings that would go in there, it doesn't mean that there will actually be services available to them.
No, I think she pretty much summed it up. Except the traffic thing. I work in Corvallis. I travel 20 to and from every day. And the traffic concerns that everybody's talking about on the corners of Spring Hill and North Albany Road, it's a battle. Getting out onto the 20, getting my commute coming home sometimes, if there's an accident on the bridge or in the middle of town, takes my commute from a half hour to an hour and a half sometimes to get home from Corvallis. It's a, traffic is one of my biggest concerns with talking about doing what we're doing.
And that's
here.
without adding all those other cars.
Okay?
Thank you.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you. Next, Bill Talley.
I'm Bill Talley. I also live on Troon at 952. My property abuts the Winkler property. I'll try to keep this brief. I did write a letter, but I've been taking a few notes during this meeting that I'd like to bring up. One is on the school capacity. Being that we just passed this $159 million bond measure for improvement, if we need more capacity, I'm skeptical that we could pass another bond measure for that purpose anytime soon. I don't think the voters would go for it myself. I sure wouldn't be in favor of it. I do like Councilman Olson's suggestion for rezoning R5 for a portion. I think that'd be more appropriate for a buffer zone. Also, I think there's a great need, as can be seen from my neighborhood, especially for the lower income housing. We have some units that are about 200,000 that are difficult to get because there's so few of them. And when they do come available, the last one was on the market for 1 day. Let's see, what else? I want to emphasize the fact that what is presented here by the opposition is based on actual data, not statistics. This is what we experience, such as the flooding. I've been through that myself. I've lost plants, part of my yard, as do most people who live along the perimeter. Also, I'd like to say that I get very skeptical when I hear about statistics, especially on this trip count. While that was being discussed, Trump's budget came to mind and how worthless that was. You know, and I'd also like to mention that I'm considered a senior, so is my wife. We both drive. So I don't know how you're going to restrict driving in a senior community. Just because you're a senior doesn't mean you don't drive. I also am disappointed that Mr. Winkler wasn't prepared today. I think this is probably a strategy on his part, because I don't know how you ask for a hearing when you're not prepared, and this has been some time. So I'm not convinced about the integrity of Mr. Winkler, especially since I've heard some disturbing stories about his tactics. Anyway, that's pretty much what I have to say, and I appreciate you taking the time to hear it. Thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you, Bill, and thank you also for the litter patrol that you do. So we're going to be missing you since you sold your house and be moving. So.
Well, I'm still going to be in the area, and I'll continue doing that. And after watching those slides on the development in downtown, I think maybe picking up litter is a much more profitable venture. I made 75 cents today, and I think a total of $3 in the last 2.5 years just from finding it on the ground. So
wow.
That's not much worse than you do as a councilman.
Yeah, exactly, about what our pay is. Thank you, Bill. Okay, Ruth, you're next. Hello, Ruth. I remember Ruth even, I think, being a part of our North Albany refinement plant too. Yes, longtime neighbor of that, of North Point, so.
I'm not a public speaker.
Yeah.
My name is Ruth Hope, H-O-P-E. I live at 747 Augusta Court Northwest. My husband and I moved to Albany in 1978, and we chose to build in North Albany. And Dave Phillips built our house. It was the first house he built in his Regency development. Anyway, I've lived with Spring Hill Road since that time. In 1987, we downsized, and I lived on Green Court near Fairmount School. That was on Spring Hill. In 1998, we moved to the original North Point condominiums, and I've lived there ever since. So I'm very familiar with traffic on Spring Hill Road. And it has increased multiple times since I've been traveling on it. And the log trucks, there's every kind of a truck imaginable that goes on that road. And getting in and out of there, I go to exercise probably 4 days a week at 7 o'clock in the morning at Sam Fit. Getting off of Hickory to come home, the longest that I've waited is 8 minutes. Other people go down Hickory to the stoplight, down to Highway 20 to the stoplight, down to Spring Hill Road to the stoplight to get on Spring Hill Road. It's ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. And I was very surprised, and the gentleman before me spoke about it, that Mr. Winkler wasn't prepared with his information tonight. He's had plenty of time to have it all ready, and I would think as a businessman, he'd have it ready by Monday in order to come here. And it's been my experience that developers always say what they want you to hear and want you to believe. And I've had lots of experience coming to council meetings, to hearings, to the comprehensive plan, and I care a lot about North Albany. And it's just ridiculous, all this stuff that's going on. And the high density that they're trying to develop all of North Albany with high density is stupid in my opinion. And I'm speechless. I brought a bunch of stuff. I'm not even going to get into it now. But it was stuff that I've experienced with all kinds of developers and what has happened and what has not happened. What the city has denied, what the city's approved. Anyway, it's way past my bedtime. I'm 92 years old, and I'm supposed to be going to Astoria at 7 in the morning. If you have any questions, I'd try to answer.
Okay, thank you, Ruth, and you have been very active too. We really appreciate it. Appreciate you, so.
Thank you to all of you.
Yeah, thank you.
Here.
We only have 2 left. Can you wait? Okay, all right. Next is Nancy DeMasi. Yes.
Hello, I'm Nancy DeMasi. My last name is D-E-M-A-S-I. I live at 299 Benton Drive in North Point. I'll try to be really brief. I know it's late, and I've already provided you with a letter. Our homeowners association keeps our neighborhood beautiful. It's green, it's flowering. I love living there. I've been there for 1.5 years, and when I bought my home, I was told there would be more residential building at the end of the development. And I'm thinking, great, apartments, fine. To change to commercial would be a blow to the residents who live there and raise their families, retire here like me, pay our taxes here, vote here. It would be really a hardship for us. We've already talked about increasing traffic, so I won't talk about that lots. We've already talked about our schools, so I won't talk about that lots. But high on the list of concerns is the problem of water runoff, and I know that's been discussed, but I'd like to touch on that a little bit by letting you know that in the winter, when it's raining, I have 4 feet of water below the gully in my backyard. I'm really concerned that that 4 feet could turn to 8 feet or 6 feet, and what would happen to the hill, and then what would happen to my patio, and nobody is assuring us that this won't happen. I actually, in the winter, have geese and ducks landing there, and now it's dry. So that it's a concern to me and to the neighbors who live on my street that this water table is going to change and go higher, and we're really worried about that. We're also, growth, we want our community to grow, but growth should not negatively impact our schools, our homes, our property values, our way of life, or the safety of our children, grandchildren in my case, who play and ride bikes in the streets of our neighborhood. Mr. Winkle doesn't live here if he wanted to buy a commercial, if he wanted a commercial zone to build his dream ideas, that's great. He should have bought a commercial zone and not a residential zone and tried to change it. Commercial equals anything. It could be fast food, it could be manufacturing, it could be nightclubs, it could be a car dealer. Mr. Winkle could sell his property once he gets a commercial zone listing and make a lot of money in just the change. And all the ideas that he has just go to nil. He could go bankrupt when he starts it. And who knows what would come in. The development that I live in went bankrupt halfway through the development and had to change homes, had to change builders. Please don't open the door to commercial, because who knows who would walk in with that open door. Thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you, Nancy. Last on the list here is Patty and Bob Hauser.
I have a handout.
Okay.
That I wanted to.
Will you just pass them down?
Pass that to Mary. Dick and I can share.
I wanted to thank all of you for your time and patience. I know it's been a long night, and I really appreciate you listening to all of our concerns. And I just wanted to point out that our North Point plan only has 63 homes. And you can tell by the turnout here that we pretty much have almost, I think, 100% attendance. And so there's a lot of concern for this rezoning. And this handout that I just passed out, hopefully, will give you a clearer picture of exactly what's being proposed. I didn't give you my name and address, did I?
No, I think I had mentioned your name, but yes, if you can do that.
Patty Hauser, Houser, 936 Belden Lane, Northwest, North Point Plan. And this is my husband, Bob. We both submitted letters to the Planning Commission and also to the City Council. We've reviewed all the materials, testimonials that people submitted. And I'm here tonight hoping that the City Council will support the Planning Commission's decision to stop the rezoning. I feel, and I believe the Commission did their due diligence. They listened to all the concerns, read all the testimonials. The record was left open for additional testimonials. And at the end, it was a unanimous decision, 6-0, and they denied rezoning. One of the things that I've learned through this whole process was that there was a considerable amount of time and effort that went into creating the North Albany Refinement Plan that was issued in 2003. And some of you may have been involved with that. The plan was developed over a 2 to 3 year period and specifically looked at the North Albany Village community and attempted to create a 50% balance between the commercial and the residential properties. And that's what we currently have, and it's working. If the rezoning occurs, and if you look at the map that I handed out, the shaded areas are the 5 parcels that are being proposed to be rezoned from residential medium to the MUC. If you rezone those and they become brown like the MUC, you now have about 70% MUC and commercial and only about 30% residential. And this was not the objective of the plan. A lot of time and money, hard work went into this. The 5 parcels of land, in fact, that Mr. Winkler would like to have rezoned were actually zoned residential medium by the Albany City Council in June of 2007, about 10 years ago. And the land was zoned this way so that there would be a buffer
or a transition between the commercial and between the residential. And this makes sense because most people don't want to buy their home next to a commercial site. When my husband and I bought our home about 5 years ago, we felt comfortable that our plan was protected, and we understood that there was undeveloped land that was zoned residential medium, and that there could be apartments or additional homes or townhomes or condominiums, and we were comfortable with that. But we never envisioned having a nightclub or a small manufacturing facility or a large retail store right next to right in our backyard, and actually having a street connecting through our small plan. So, in summary, I want to leave you with two important questions. What has changed since the refinement plan was issued to necessitate rezoning the land to MUC? And how has Mr. Winkler demonstrated the need to rezone this land when there are so many undeveloped MUC and commercial properties along Hickory that could be developed without rezoning? Thank you, and I hope that you'll support the Planning Commission's decision to deny the rezoning. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Patty.
And I'm Bob Hauser, and I also live at 936 Belden Lane Northwest with Patty. After hearing the testimonies tonight, what I'd like to do is just touch upon a few different things. I'd like to speak first off to criterion 1, which deals with consistency with the comprehensive plan. Mr. Martineau read a description for our village center to you folks earlier this evening. I'd like to read that again, and I'd like to add the sentence that he left off at the end of the paragraph he quoted from. So it says, and this is comprehensive plan, chapter 9, land use planning, mixed use general requirements. So this is a requirement. The way I understand, where I work, requirements are things you gotta do. They're not selected do's, because you gotta do's, and I presume that's the same thing when it comes to zoning. So it says, village center provides for a mixture of uses to serve nearby neighborhoods. These uses must include retail and residential uses, and may include offices, community, and personal services, and live work units. Development within a village center must be pedestrian friendly, fit the desired scale and character of nearby neighborhoods, which I question what's proposed fits the scale and character of our neighborhood, and prevent the appearance of strip commercial development. Now, this was the sentence that Mr. Martineau left off, which I think makes the proposal non-compliant. Within the village center plan designation, there will be at least 2 zones, one mixed-use commercial zone, the other medium to high-density residential zone that provides a mix of housing choices. And the way I interpret that is you can't rezone everything MUC. Part of it would have to remain RM. And there's density differences that we've talked about that come into play, but that's my interpretation of that. And I was a little bit surprised that last sentence was left off, because my read is what's proposed doesn't meet the comprehensive plan. I'd be interested in feedback on that. North Albany refinement plan, Patty talked about that a little bit ago, and it's actually a great document. I read through it a few times, and it's clear that there was a lot of time and effort and preparation, and probably people have scars on their back from going through that as well. But it does lay out a great plan, and when we were looking at it the other night, I did a search. It talks about balanced development. You'll find that phrase actually dozens of times in there, and as Patty pointed out, the objective is to provide balance of commercial and residential use. Just wanted to point that out. In the North Albany refinement plan, it talks about the village center we currently have, North Albany Village. And it, too, identifies, and I quote, mixed-use commercial center catering to the surrounding residential areas and North Albany as a whole, centered at the intersection of Hickory Street and North Albany Road. That's what we have. Additional medium-density residential land adjacent to the mixed-use commercial center. So the thinking at that time was it was going to be mixed, medium-density residential land. And then it goes on to define what was envisioned by the people that developed the plan. It's a lot different than what we were talking about here. So this is actually, if anybody wants to look this up, it's out of Chapter 5, Hickory Street Plan, Section 5.1. And it goes on to say, medium-density residential, RM, and so they're defining what they mean here. The zone provides medium-density residential use between 8 and 20 units per acre. The RM zone is located west and northeast of the commercial and mixed-use area. Northeast is where our North Point plan lies. Housing types could include single-family attached, garden apartments, condominiums, small lot, single-family, and row houses. So the developers of the plan, who spent a lot of time, a lot of resources, had a lot of outside contractors look at it, they were never thinking putting in high-density apartment buildings. That wasn't part of the vision. So, as has been brought up before, what's the compelling reason for change? And why would we go in violation of what appears to be a requirement here to rezone everything MUC? What's the compelling reason? There's MUC available right along Hickory Street. Available for purchase. You can build whatever you want on there. And I think also, if you go along with this change, it kind of sets the stage for other developers that come along, because you will have set precedents. And so somebody that wants to build something that's got a pocket full of change will come in and say, you did this before, you have precedents, they're going to come to you, and you're going to say, yep, right. So I'd like to close with just saying that, and it's been mentioned before, you got to do judge the merits of the zoning based on needing that kind of property there, not the promise of affordable high-rise apartments that may not be developed. Again, I would like to close by saying that clearly I am against the rezoning, and I hope you consider the different things that were stated tonight by everyone here. The area is extremely well represented, just about everybody in the plans here, so community involvement's high, so please take that into consideration in your deliberation. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, that was it that had signed up. So is there anyone else that's wanting to testify for or against? Looking at the time, if there is, Bill, we're going to need to take a break. We've been sitting for three hours. If Bill can, is there anybody else? Okay, anybody else that's wanting to also? Okay, so we'll just take Bill here. Yeah, thank you, Bill.
My name is Bill Root, R-O-O-T. I live at 2634 Northwest Valley View in North Albany, and I'm the chairman of the North Albany Neighborhood Association. I had no intention of talking tonight on this development until I heard the developer. He was saying that the reason they want it is because they want to put medical facilities. Well, there are medical facilities all over that area. Corvallis Clinic has got a medical facility. Samaritan's got it. They've got a urgent care unit. There's a veterinary clinic. There's a hearing aid clinic. There's an eye clinic, all within walking distance of that development. So that throws water in their argument for changing the development. There's no reason that they have to change the zoning to put in the development that they want. The only thing that would give them reason to want to change the development is to increase the density. And that's the one thing that we don't need. Already we've got a 34-unit cluster development that's been approved. We've also got a 178-unit development that's going to be showing up in the near future. We've already had meetings on that. Albany Heights development is in process of being developed right now. There's development going all over. One item of that development is the same. They all have to cross the river on those two bridges that are already overcrowded. And that's all I needed to say.
Okay, all right, thank you, Bill. So probably this might be continuing the public hearing, but I think what we'll do is we will take about a quick 3-minute break here and come back, and then we will talk about
4 minutes and
the
7 seconds.
Okay.
Just real quickly, because I think some people may go home, but I really appreciate everybody coming out tonight and your input. And Rebecca Seltz. So my wife teaches 6th grade science. I know all about overcrowding and boys.
Yeah, we really appreciate folks. If we do, real quick, if we do continue the public hearing, that means then when that hearing comes back, if the applicant can state more testimony, and so can the opposition too on that. So, okay. We'll go ahead and recess, and I'll come on down and talk to you, Ruth.
Well, you know, we can have the guy with the camera. He can be here.
No, I slapped him.
Move in here.
I saw Tom Cordier today. It was, I was in back on the Doug was getting some stuff and he was too.
Yeah. You would take
Then we better figure out a date. In other words, we have to
What's the method of polling that you would go along with?
As much as I hate to say this, you could do it unless it's the 14th of June. If you're going to continue the hearing, you have to continue it to a time certain.
Let's make sure we're going to have a full council.
We're going to have to renotice it.
Let's make sure we have a full council. Okay, folks, we're going to, we're reconvening back into this, to the session, and we also have, we're going to be probably looking at continuing the public hearing.
We're on air right now, guys.
Yes. If we continue the public hearing, though, we need to specify a specific date so we don't have to re-advertise, but we also need to make sure we're going to have a full council whenever we reschedule for another date, too, so.
And then I guess what ask staff, so what we're saying is that if we're going to, if council elects tonight to continue the public hearing to another date, the applicants agreed to continue it for at least 90 days, if that's correct. If we do a date certain, then council by law is not required to re-advertise the hearing. If we do not do a date certain, then we would re-advertise the hearing. Or council may elect to re-advertise the hearing regardless of whether we do a date certain to make sure everybody was noticed. And if that's the case, then I would probably not recommend trying to get a date certain tonight with not knowing everyone's calendars and what the schedule is for the other meetings that are coming up, because this could be a long one again. But it's up to you. So Bob, I'd ask you, would you want to re-notice anyway regardless of whether we have a date certain? Would you leave that to council? Okay.
It looks like, in our quick look, June 14th would be a day that I think is open, but again, not knowing everybody's calendars and getting into summer, we'd be happy to find a date and notice as soon as we could, whatever that day was.
Is everyone here on June 14th?
That's
what
looks like I am.
You gotta be here.
Oh.
I forgot.
Yeah, I think so. We
got a
could
dental
continue for that. Would that work then?
So are we going to re-notice, I saw one council member shaking their head that he wanted to re-notice regardless. So before we pin down a date certain, are we going, if we do a date certain, are we planning on not re-noticing the public hearing?
It's not my decision. Council can direct us to whatever. My general inclination is to renotice. I'd rather over-communicate than
So if we renotice, then if we're going to renotice anyway, I'm just saying we don't have to pin down a date tonight if council doesn't want to do that. They have the next 90 days to decide when the best time to have this hearing is.
Can we tentatively set a date and get confirmation from council and plan on renoticing?
I don't know that I would do it tentatively at this point. I would just wait until everyone decides and then advertise it for that day and make sure, if it's the 14th, it's the 14th, if it's a different day.
Well, what we have done before is we announce it as June 14th. When it comes to June 14th, then on the agenda item, we're just continuing to another date. So we have not had to re-advertise.
I understand, but I think council's wanted to re-advertise. There seems like that's
Just re-advertise. Make sure nobody forgets it.
Re-advertise, okay.
Re-advertise.
That's fine, okay. And with the applicant, that is okay to, you're waiving the 120-day rule and for up to 60 days?
90.
Or 90 days? Okay, all right. Also, I want to make sure, though, as part of our normal process would be, is if the applicant had any rebuttal testimony, and I would imagine you want to hold that over to the continuance.
Right.
Okay, thought so. I just wanted to make sure we were giving that opportunity, so. Yeah.
I would just want to clarify for people who were at the Planning Commission meeting before, this is a little bit different in that
The second meeting at the Planning Commission was not a public hearing. It was a meeting, but it wasn't a hearing. The hearing had been closed, and it was just the commission was deliberating, so the audience didn't have a chance to participate. This is not that situation. You will have a chance again to come back and provide additional testimony, as well as the applicant. So it'll be a whole, same hearing, but you can come back and speak again.
But it's not required to restate what was said
Exactly.
tonight. What's in the record tonight.
That's
is
correct. You
still in
don't
the
need
record
to
the
restate
next-
what you said
But
tonight.
it is
It's already in the
effectively a
record.
new de novo hearing.
It is not a new de novo
Oh,
hearing. It's the
no.
same hearing. It's just a
Same hearing,
continuation.
But it's still.
Right. So if someone has spoken tonight on issues and they don't need to restate those same issues. On the other hand, if someone else shows up and has not spoken and wants to speak, then they can, so.
Okay, all right, Bill?
So I had just a few questions for staff to clarify. Can we do that tonight while it's still fresh in everybody's mind?
It would need to be, or unless you wanted it bring it up at the continuance of the public hearing. You could have more questions that arise that night.
So you're wanting me to save my questions for the next 60 days or whatever?
It's up to you. Yeah, up to you, Bill.
All right.
Yeah, you
well,
can ask him.
I took good notes, so I guess I'll save it.
Yeah, okay. There might be more, so, yeah. But
Well,
it's
could I?
up to you.
Well, I
Could I
guess
make
I'm
a-
looking for clarification. Is there some reason I can't ask the questions tonight?
No,
No, there's not.
All right,
And
then I'm asking my question.
I was going to say, and it would actually help staff to be able to maybe research them after you do ask them.
All
if
right,
they
so
don't
a
know,
comment was made
Yeah.
about the North Albany refinement plan, I guess, and I don't need the answer tonight, but if I could have a little bit of feedback on, does that refinement plan have any impact or effect, or is it
Legal.
apply to our decision? In other words, we've got the list of criteria, and how does that fit in the picture?
So if a person were to look on the comprehensive plan, they would find policies and goal statements that could really support either side. The refinement plans, like North Albany and South Albany, were incorporated into the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan gets implemented by the Albany Development Code. And the subject properties that are in question tonight are designated village center. And that allows for a range of zones to be assigned to it, of which MUC is a part of. If it was intended with the refinement plan not for that to be the case, it would have had to have been designated something else, like high-density residential or medium-density residential on those properties. But they were designated village center.
Okay. Again, I heard several people talking about drainage. I understand the difference between natural drainage, water runoff, and our storm sewer system. So in the criteria, number 3, it does mention sanitary sewer, storm sewer, and so forth. It doesn't mention natural drainage or runoff. And I believe when I asked you earlier, you said that is not a criteria to consider. Is that correct?
I don't recall the question about natural drainage on a site, but storm drainage is part of that third criteria. I'm not trained in the area of dealing with hydraulic engineering and drainage situations. That would probably be something we'd have to ask Public Works about.
So I
As
know
far as
somebody-
I believe, I understand, is that property owners are responsible for their own drainage, and they can't increase or decrease the drainage that naturally flows across a lot. But that's about the limit of my knowledge on that topic.
And again, that would come out in a site plan review? That type of thing would be looked at?
Yeah, I think that's the point to make. So, what that criteria is getting at is, are there public facilities available to adequately serve the new zone, the new proposed zoning? So we don't have a development application in front of us. All the property-to-property drainage concerns, or where's water going and not going now, and how are we addressing that with the development, or how is the applicant addressing that with the development? That all comes out later. What we're looking at here with these criteria is there adequate public infrastructure to serve the site? And the answer to that, as was determined by staff that reviewed it, is yes. There's adequate facilities constructed in Hickory Street that ultimately drain to the river to serve the site. All the details get worked out in an actual proposal.
Okay. 2 more quick ones and I'm done. The trip count issue, and a gentleman spoke to, well, yeah, you looked at the PM trip count. You could tweak that, maybe you should be looking at a different time of day. Is there a standard or some rules or regulations that says we look at PM trip count, or are you allowed to pick what time of day you're going to say is your trip count?
Ron is unfortunately not here tonight, and we'll make sure we have a good, educated answer for you when Ron's here.
Fair,
'Cause
that's
I'll
fair
just
enough.
make sure I don't mess it up.
And again, what I stated before, I'm trying to focus on what this looks like developed RM versus the MEC. So a gentleman said, you could have 11 to 12 3-story buildings. Well, in one area. Well, you can have 3-story buildings in the RM.
That would be true, up to 45 feet high.
But I guess the deal is density. You could have 11 to 12 in a smaller area, and it's a hypothetical question. I don't know what that area looks like, and in RM, maybe you could only have 5 buildings or 6, but in my mind, how do I compare the two? 11 to 12 versus what? If it was 11 to 12 versus 10, it's like there isn't that much difference. If it was 11 to 12 versus 4, that's huge.
So there's 2 parts to that I'd like to respond to. One is that there's a maximum lot coverage standard in these zones, and in the RM zone, the maximum lot coverage is 70%. In the MUC, the maximum lot coverage is 80%. So that's another example of there being kind of an external limitation as to how much realistic density you could accomplish on the property. There's a height standard also in the MUC zone that's 50 feet as opposed to 45 feet in the RM. So that too imposes another type of limitation as to how realistically large your development could be on that given acreage. The drawing that was referred to and turned in as an exhibit was not submitted by the applicant for the zone change application. It was merely a conceptual sketch that was submitted to staff before the application was submitted, getting feedback as to, well, what do you think about something like this? But it was a sketch. It was nothing more than that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, that it, Bill?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Staff, council have any other questions? Mike?
So what I'm understanding is if it stays RM, the developer can go and build apartment complexes tomorrow if the plan was approved.
That's correct.
So the problems with the schools would still be the same? The problem with egress and ingress as far as vehicles would still be pretty close to the same? Still could go up to 192 vehicles a day?
Yes, sir.
All of that's the same between the RM and the MUC. The only thing is we can go up 5 feet and we have a little more density. But he could build apartment complexes there tomorrow.
Yes, and he can also take advantage of density bonuses that the zoning designation of RM would allow. Like you pointed out, there's a 15% density bonus you could get if you guarantee that a certain number of those apartments are built for affordable housing.
Okay, so I'm kind of with Bill, I'm trying to understand what the difference is between the RM and the MUC, and I'm not seeing much.
David, is it fair to say that that's a comparison of one alternative and that the MUC, there are some other use types that are different that might be able to locate there? So if it was developed as proposed, that scenario would be accurate, but it's the other use types that
But it could allow
are
those other
available.
ranges of uses, that's right.
Okay, council, have any other questions? Clarification? Okay, all right.
Do you have a motion to continue?
Okay.
Did you have a motion?
How about a motion to continue the public hearing?
So move.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, motion carried. All right, thank you. Okay, thank you, folks. And you will be notified when the next hearing is then. Okay, thank you. Yeah. Oh, yes, I think so, that'd be good. 26, I think. Okay. Next is business from the public. Anyone here that needs to bring an item forward this evening? Okay, not seeing anyone. Okay, council, we have...
Nobody's going to stay for the rest of our meeting.
Yeah. All right. We have also. Yeah. Our regulars.
So we're on the marijuana ordinance.
You're done.
Is that where we're at?
You're all done, yeah. Yep.
Okay, do you want to read the first ordinance?
Yeah, do you want me
First
to introduce it at all, discuss it at all, or tell you
Or
what it
did you-
is? Or?
Yeah, you want to go ahead and tell the council what it is?
Didn't we already have it read the first time, and we just moved it to this one?
We haven't, I don't believe we've read it yet.
Not this one.
So what's before you tonight is a marijuana ordinance that kind of closes the loop in the regulation of medical marijuana uses other than medical marijuana dispensaries. As you may recall, late last year, literally and figuratively, we adopted an ordinance to basically regulate all additional recreational uses of marijuana, including retail. Tonight, what's before you is an ordinance that will, like I said, close the loop and begin regulating other medical uses other than medical dispensaries. Currently, we regulate medical marijuana dispensaries the same way we regulate retail sales of recreational marijuana. We do not regulate any other medical uses. This ordinance will regulate medical uses other than medical dispensaries the same way that we regulate recreational marijuana that is not retail. So, if I can make this a little more clear, because it is complicated in a way, we have medical dispensaries and retail sales here, all other medical and recreational uses here. They will be the same. The difference is how we measure the distances between the facilities and the property, which is how we define the 300 feet, and that we will not have an industrial exception except for the retail sales and the medical dispensaries. There is one that I'm aware of, business that currently would be affected by this. You'll notice in the ordinance there is a grandfathering clause in there for any businesses that were in operation legally on April, I believe, the 12th of this year. And if there are not any questions, I'll go ahead and read the first time.
So that would be, so basically, because right now we don't regulate medical marijuana growers, and this fits the
Correct.
grower the same as recreational, right?
Growing
Right.
and processing.
Right.
Growing, processing, yes, same as we would do recreational.
Yeah, okay, gotcha. All right.
So does our other ordinance regulate recreational growing and processing?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, it does.
That's the one we adopted last year.
And is this ordinance, the 300 foot, is that building to building?
The 300 feet on this ordinance is building to property, property boundary to property boundary, which is different than the way the retail sales and the recreational dispensaries is measured. So it's boundary line to boundary line.
That's what I thought. Why is this different?
It is different because if you recall last year, we had an issue where there was a kind of a split on the council with a property that was a split zone property. We had commercial on the front end and residential on the back. So the property technically was not within 300 feet of
A dispensary.
where the dispensary was not within 300 feet of residential zoning, but was within 300 feet of the property line. And so there was some confusion there, interpretation-wise, and so we've closed the loop on that. It will not affect that
The
property.
reason
that
the
we're
two are
discussing.
different is because there was some in existence, and that was how we facilitated grandfathering in existing businesses. We were able to, that was how we reached consensus. That's how the council reached consensus. I didn't get to vote. I didn't want to vote.
Okay, do you want to read the first ordinance?
Yes. An ordinance amending Section 5.08.025 of the Albany Municipal Code establishing regulations for all medical marijuana businesses and facilities in the city of Albany and declaring an emergency.
Move that the ordinance be read a second time, title only.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Okay, all right, this will be carried over for a second reading at our next meeting. Okay, all right. Okay, next, our poor two Parks and Recreation gals in the back, Debbie and Katie, have been sitting through 3.5 hours of a meeting. So this is a resolution that's on page 230. Is there questions of Katie and Debbie on this, on the Albany Senior Center Endowment Fund?
I have a question.
Okay. Yep, we got a question.
It just, there's a comment that the money is a small fund balance. 52,000 sounds like a lot of money, so I don't understand. I'm not necessarily opposed to this, but why can't the money be utilized as it was intended?
The money that was originally prepared in the ordinance bill said that only interest could be used.
Oh, okay.
And so, the interest generated is less than $100, $200 a
Right,
year.
I understand.
And so, it has been that as, this fund was developed like 30 years ago. And, I think we're up to $400 or $500 now.
Okay.
Perhaps, so, well, the balance is, and actually this move would move it into the senior foundation, so they could use it for upgrading, renovating senior center as needed. It removes that restriction.
I'll make a motion for adoption of the resolution.
Second.
Okay, any discussion?
Question.
Uh-huh.
There's a codicil currently that says you can only use the interest. And so what we're doing is doing away with it so we can not have to live with the codicil.
I would say that when it was first developed, the idea was that it would generate enough interest that the senior center could
think so.
support it off of the interest from
Should be on
that
the mic,
is we have checked with Secretary-
Katie, could you hold just 1 second? We're going to bring the mic to you so the audience can hear.
So when it was developed, it was originally intended, is my understanding, I came after the development, that we would be able to live off the interest. And so over the years, we have certainly abided by that, hoping that the fund would grow. It has become a fund that people have not had interest in contributing to. We checked with the Secretary of State. We have also gone through a tax attorney who said that when in these kinds of situations, that the best move then is to find a 501c3 that serves the same purpose. We have one, the Senior Foundation, whose sole purpose is to serve the needs of older adults in the Albany community through the Albany Senior Center. And so their recommendation, both at the Secretary of State level, at the Treasury, and with the lawyer, was that we transfer those funds so that they can be used for the purpose they were intended, which is to support the senior center. But the limitation has kept us from doing that, and interest rates have kept us from doing that.
Point there being, the people who donated money to that originally donated it on the basis of it was going to be used, the corpus would would remain as the corpus. My concern is, I don't know if any of those people are still around, but we made a deal with them when we took the money.
And the deal was that we would make, the way they set it up, and I believe Jim was actually one of the people that helped to develop it at the time, the way that they set it up was so that they were concerned that it would go to the city and be siphoned off perhaps for other purposes. And their sole concern, and actually I've met most of the people over the years, was that it would stay focused on the senior center. And in talking with the attorney that worked with us on this, the way that it's written into being given to the senior foundation is that it would still stay focused on benefiting the senior center and the people that use it. Certainly, I guess there could be people that said, that's not what I intended. I can tell you that met 99.9% of the people that gave the funds over the last 30 years, and I feel pretty confident, for whatever it's worth, that this is exactly what they would want to have happen, that it would support the future of the senior center.
Okay, thank you for the explanation.
Okay. All right, there's been a motion and a second. Any more discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Okay. That's 5-1, motion carried.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, Katie and Debbie. Sorry you had to stay through such a long evening. Next item is adoption of the consent calendar. If there isn't any items that need to be pulled off this evening, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to adopt consent calendar.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, motion carried. And next is award of bid. This is on page 251. This is Crocker Lane reconstruction. Staff have any comments?
Sure. Chris is here tonight to help answer any questions that you might have, but I really want to go to bed, so I'm going to try to keep this as short as possible. Staff's recommending that council award this bid for Crocker Lane reconstruction in the amount of $1,861,694.04 to the low bidder, Carter and Company of Salem, Oregon. All the details are provided in the staff report. Happy to answer any questions that you have.
Questions?
I would say that I know all these companies, and they're all good companies, so sometimes there's a concern of council that, gee, who's Carter and Company? I never heard of them. But did a lot of work with them over the years, and they're a good outfit.
Yeah, that was a new name for me, so that's good to know, Bill, that you have worked with them, so.
We've seen bids from them on other projects. Chris and I were talking about it before the meeting. We couldn't recall a bid that they had won, but seen their name around on our projects.
Okay, all right, council, what would you like to do with this item?
Move to award the bid.
Second.
All right, any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Yeah, that was
Thanks,
an easy
Chris.
one for you tonight, Chris. Sorry, you just had to sit through 3 hours and 40 minutes.
It's good for them to do every once in a while.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, guys. All right, council business from the council. So, Rich, anything this evening?
Well, my supplier sandbagged me when I said wasn't going to have any lenses till the middle of next month. I got 200 of them today.
Oh, well, good.
So-
Good. So, get that word out.
How much are you
The
selling
price,
them for,
actually, the price
Counselor?
did go up. It went up 3 cents. So,
How
I'm
much
going to
are
take
they?
that out of the Kiwanis donation.
How much are you asking for them?
$3.
Oh, 3.
Thank you. We had an email question tonight from somebody who wanted to know if we were selling them and where they could find them and how much they cost.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay, all right. Anything else?
That's
Okay,
enough.
Ray?
I think I emailed everybody, including Hasso, that May 31st, 3 PM at the Public Works Warehouse, as we're having our first painting party for the Waverly Lake Duck. So everybody's
Parks and
coordinating.
Rec.
Pardon? Parks and Rec
Warehouse.
warehouse
By
next to
Timberland.
the dog run,
Yep.
Timberland Park.
Got it all set and got the artists there ready to go and
So we can all
volunteers.
join in with spray guns and stuff?
Oh, no. This is going to be it's already been, it'll have the base coat. This is going to be the details to get on it, so, yeah.
Oh, so people that don't know how to paint can't do anything.
Bring your paint
It'll
gun.
be easy. It's a pretty big piece to paint, but yeah,
That's it.
so. But, okay, thank you, Ray. Mike, anything?
Negative.
Okay, Bessie?
No, I just want to say that much to my husband's happiness, the Burger King on Drury has reopened again, so he's a happy
Life is
camper.
good
You can
again.
almost walk there from your house, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, Bill?
Just a quick explanation about tonight, because the first individual spoke, John Lehman. I kept asking questions, and at some point, without looking, I heard some noises down there.
He
whether it
heard
was-
Wes yelling at him.
Whether it was groans or gasps or whatever, but he had turned in 16 pages of signatures and was representing a large group, and I felt he was a good one to try and clarify some of the questions I had, so I kept asking him questions. So that's why I did it.
Yeah. No, they were good questions. I was almost holding my breath. I was afraid you were going to start, debating with them, like a deliberating. I thought, oh, we're not there yet. Yeah, no, worked
That
out
was it.
perfect.
Thank you.
Yeah. And actually, everybody did keep the short testimony too, and really stuck to the point, so they did a very good job. So the neighbor did. Okay, Dick, anything?
No.
Okay. Nope, the only thing I had was today was Key Bank's Day of Caring. They came out and landscaped Albany Partnership's Life Skills Housing. This was the duplex that we received free for $1 during when the stimulus money came out in 2010. That was to be for permanent supportive housing. So I was out doing yard work all afternoon. So after tonight, I'm really tired. So yeah, it's been a long day today, but no, they did a wonderful job and it was great. We have such wonderful volunteers in our community, and also seeing that with our historic preservation that you saw this evening. I mean, we've just got such wonderful folks in Albany, and I just was glad that John Bach got an award too. He's just such an amazing individual. So yeah. Okay, that's it. Wes, anything?
Just to follow up on what we, we have the issue from Jorge, and maybe we should deal with that one first, since that's a lot of the more controversial.
You're an issue?
Yeah, Wes just said I was an issue, but.
Asking which issue is that?
Council, before you, I actually sent an email earlier today with a request from a 83-year-old company that started in Portland and then moved down to Salem and leased some space there, and now they're looking to relocate because they outgrown their facility. They have about 10 employees with an average salary or income of $54,000 with benefits. And they're looking to purchase the facility or the property in 4455 Marion Street. They produce some car and truck washes or soap, degreasers, and the bulk of their business is in the Pacific Northwest, but they also ship to multiple states and internationally to places such as China, Japan, Sweden, Canada, and Mexico. Recently, we just learned that they are almost done with the process. We have multiple challenges that staff, AMEDEC, and the realtors from Keller Williams worked through. But now they learned that they were actually they were expecting to be on city water, and they learned that the property was serviced with a well. Also, the well is not really under property, is close by, so it's not consistent in terms of the quantity of water and reliability that they're expecting. In order to connect to city water, the total cost would be $15,342. What staff we're recommending is we have a fund which is called Water Economic Development Fund, that we can transfer that $15,342 to the water fund to satisfy that requirement and allow this company to move forward with the process and relocate here in Albany. So the request is to gain your support or ask your support for us to move these funds from the Economic Development Fund to the water fund.
So just to explain a little bit, we have we have a Water Economic Development Fund and a Sewer Economic Development Fund, where money's set aside to do exactly these types of things, whether it be payment of some of the related fees with development, or in many cases we've used it to construct infrastructure. So especially on things like SDCs where you can't waive fees. So we're moving money from one water utility fund to another water utility fund. It's a means to an end, and this is one example of why that fund was created. It's just completely up to council on when and how to use it.
We used it for Viper Northwest. They needed to have some fire suppression and stuff done, and so that fund helped them.
Yeah, we use it for snow temp. We use it for. That's too late. Number of other people.
I know. Actually, I think we tapped into that one also for the Legion member.
We did, yes.
Because they wanted, it's not normal for that type of use, but it was where they didn't qualify for CARA. But, yeah.
I don't have a problem with this, other than the fact that we're talking about, this is some jobs. Well, they have 10 employees. The 10 employees work in Salem. They're not going to fire those employees, and, so we're really not getting any more employees. We're just they're just moving from Salem down to here, and hell, some of them may be from here, who knows? But anyway, it's a little weird. Yeah. If we need a motion, I move that we do it.
Second. Okay, motion's been made and a second. Any discussion?
Yes, I have a question.
Uh-huh.
Snow Temp, when they added on, had trouble with meeting code for fire flow on their building. And Snow Temp is in the process of trying to expand. Is by adding this going to cause any capacity problems on that line that was redone for Snow Temp's fire suppression system?
No, these folks are downstream of Snowtown.
Okay. But if Snow Temp goes belly up and starts burning, they might not get no water.
Yeah, as part of the Snow Temp project, there's a piggybacked on a large city project. There's a large diameter water line loop all the way around their place. One of the things we found when they had the issue reference was actually after it was constructed, and they didn't get as much water as they thought they were going to get. And we found a failed air release valve in the water system on where we crossed the canal closer to 34th. Okay. So got the air, there was trapped air in the system. Got that out, and they had everything they needed.
Then I'm good.
Okay. All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, motion carried. All right, thank you, Jorge.
And just briefly, I was going to say, I think everybody got the email today regarding the potential closure of the National Energy Technology Lab. It was not included in the president's budget. What I would propose is that I'll draft a letter for council signature to go to our federal representatives, our 2 senators and our congressman, and then the council may want to consider additional efforts. My recommendation would be that you do that as a part of a larger group, involving the county, the Chamber of Commerce, and others, because it's obviously been an important part of the local economy for the last 74 years, I think it is, and it would be sad to lose that resource that not only includes current employees, but also included research that led to creation of whole industries.
Well, as soon as I got the notice from you, I took it upon myself and immediately passed it on to Chamber of Commerce and Andy and Sarah. And very quickly got a response back from Andy saying, thanks for the heads up and the intel. He's definitely going to get some stuff and try and work with some people to get something going, but that was all he said. But he thanked for the quick notice. He hadn't heard that yet, so.
Well, I guess I'd point out, there has not been a budget passed by the Senate since April 29th, 2009. So the chance of this ending up going through the Senate is pretty small.
2 chances, slim and fat.
Yeah.
So Wes, you would draft up the letter and then have the council?
Well, yeah, we'll bring it back.
We'll sign, okay. I mean, the last time we had a request of advocating at the national level. Some councilors had a problem with us advocating on that, so.
But Mayor,
Are
that
you okay
one
on this?
wasn't anything to do with employment here. That was about the military spending or sending it to health and stuff, so that was different. This one involves a lot of employees, a lot of people here.
No.
And so I think that's the difference.
But what was stated before is we should not be telling the federal, national government anything. That's some of the concerns, so the councilors that had concerns, are you okay with this?
And I'd like to
Advocating for
say
national-
too,
Yeah.
that that used to be part of the Department of the Interior. It used to be a Bureau of Mines. And Newt Gingrich got to be Speaker of the House, and he got the Bureau of Mines canceled.
So
that's
it's Newt's
why
fault.
it became a Department of Energy.
Yeah, it's Newt's
Yeah.
fault.
Yeah. So is everyone okay?
He liquidated the Bureau of
We're
Mines.
fine.
So, okay.
We didn't liquidate the Colorado Bureau of Mines.
The Bureau of Mines is no longer a bureau in the federal government. The research center may be there, our research center is here, but it's no
Well, 'cause
longer part of the Department
The
of Energy.
Colorado Bureau of Mines still does stuff for
Well, that
the
must
welding
be,
society.
that's probably the State Bureau of Mines, perhaps.
Dick would know, he worked at Bureau of Mines.
I know about that.
On the board of AWS.
That he knows.
I got
Okay,
retired.
staff have anything else? Oh,
One thing,
Marilyn?
let me
Yeah.
just lighten the mood before we adjourn. The West Albany High School Percussion Ensemble and Jazz Band are going to be doing a concert in the plaza from 7 to 8:45 tomorrow night. Come on down.
Yeah, and actually I saw it out on, Lisa had sent it out on Albany Happenings. I told her to put it on Downtown Association. There wasn't a link to share it on the Facebook, so she's going to try to get that out.
It's been on our Facebook page all afternoon. And
Yeah, oh, good, okay. Okay, great, thank you. All right, is that it? Our next work session would be June 12th, and regular session is June 14th, and we are adjourned.